Hi, everyone. We hope everyone enjoyed their lunch. It was a great lunch. I enjoyed mine. I had fish tacos. What did you have? Well, we're excited for the second part of day two um, coming up, and we are still in rebuttal witness mode. And so Johnny Depp has called several rebuttal witnesses. He first began, as court earlier today began, um, Amber Heard rested her case, and then Johnny Depp team argued for a motion to strike to dismiss Amber Heard's case. And of course, we heard a rebuttal of that. And what happened was the judge decided not to grant that and stated that that would be the jury that would make that determination. Then Amber Heard team countered that, but they countered before the judge rulings. So then when we get into testimony, we had Walter Hamada, who is the president of DC-based film production Warner Brother Pictures, and he testified that indeed they were not going to renegotiate Amber Heard's salary, and that the reason for the pause or delay was because Amber Heard and the actor's chemistry was out of sync, and there was no chemistry, and they had to do it back in. Okay, let's get to it. All right. Also, after him, there was the break, and then Dr. David Colbert, the hand doctor, testified. Then Mark Richards, entertainment attorney, testified to the fact of, there was no analysis that had a foundation for Amber Heard's damages. Then Michael Spindler, a forensic accountant, testified and gave information. So we had Bania, who also testified. So now we are back for court, and testimony will begin shortly. They are now at the bench, of course, conferring prior to calling their next witness. Some of the witnesses I went over earlier today, and I'll put the link to part one in the chat. That was on the docket, but as we know, they don't necessarily need or have to be called as rebuttal witnesses. And the people that were on docket was and are Dr. Richard Shaw, Kimberly Collins, Candle, wait a minute, is it Candie? Candle Davidson Godroom, Walter Hamada, he did testify. Richard Marks, he's already testified. Mike Spindler, he's testified. Doug Bania, he's testified. Morgan Knight, Dr. David A. Kelber, he's testified. And Jennifer Howell. Those are the ones that are slated for today. But again, there is no definite that they will testify today due to either time constraints or due to there not being a need for them to testify. So court has resumed with Bania. And so Bania, let's get with it. Okay, they're conferring at the bench, and now they're
What's your understanding of Ms. Arnold's basis for her opinion that Ms. Heard's career should have been similar to that of those identified actors?
Ms. Arnold stated that when producers or her industry is looking to hire talent and actors, that it's important to best understand the public's perception of the actors that they're considering, and that it's important to look into social media to see what is happening with the actors they're considering for either a movie or even an endorsement opportunity with companies. So that was her approach.
And is that the process she followed in providing her analysis of those purportedly comparable actors?
No. Although she stated that, she went in and brought in these alleged comparable actors, and without really reasoning behind that.
Did you conduct an analysis based on your expertise in social media and internet analytics of Ms. Heard compared to the actors to whom Ms. Arnold compares her?
I did.
And what did you find?
Well, since Ms. Arnold stated that the proper approach is looking at the public perspective, looking into social media, and she did not do that, I felt that was the best approach to do this based on her words. So yes, I did go into best understanding the public perspective of Ms. Heard and the alleged comparable actors using Q scores. Then I also went and did some analysis online and on social media as well.
Can you briefly remind the jury what Q scores are?
Yeah, again, Q scores measure how well a celebrity, it could be a cartoon character, it could be a sports person, how well they're known, how well they're liked, and how much they're disliked. And it's an industry standard tool that's used. It's not just focused on the movies that they're in, but it's focused on them as actors, but also what's happening in their personal lives come to play as well. So that's how Q scores are typically used.
Did you prepare a demonstrative that reflects the Q score analysis you completed?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Your Honor, may I approach again? All right, thank you.
No objection to the demonstrative.
All right, we'll identify plaintiffs 1296 for identification and publish to the jury.
Mr. Bania, what point in time do these Q scores represent that are reflected on your demonstrative?
So these are the winter 2019 Q scores that are reflected here. And what was important for me is I wanted to find Q scores that represented Ms. Heard after Aquaman. And remember, Aquaman is December of 2018. These Q scores were gathered in February of 19, but before the Waldman statements.
And what did you find based on the Q scores that you looked at?
So as you see here on the left are positive Q scores, and the higher the number, the better. As you can see, Ms. Godot has the highest Q score out of the group of actors here at a 28. But you're going to notice Ms. Heard has the lowest positive Q score. She has a 9. So I find that very interesting that she doesn't appear to fit in as a comparable with these alleged comparable actors. I think what's also interesting is the average Q score for all actors being scored at that time, which include all the alleged comparable actors here, score at an average of 17. And you can see, again, she is 9, well below that. And then on the right side, you're going to see the negative Q scores. So this is how much people dislike you. So the lower the score is better. You can see Mr. Momoa is over here with the lowest at an 8, but you can see Ms. Heard is over here at a 28, which was quite a difference from she is very, very much little. Her positive score is very low, and her negative score is very high, which tells me that she does not fit in as a comparable as it relates to these alleged comparable actors.
What opinions did you form based on that Q-score analysis?
My opinions as it relates to these Q scores is, Ms. Arnold used these actors as allegedly comparable actors. But really listening to her testimony yesterday, it appears that she's abandoned this approach. I don't think she's using these comparable actors or these alleged comparable actors anymore. She's more relying on her experience, and I agree with that.
Did Ms. Arnold offer a criticism of your use of the Q-scores here?
She did, yes.
And what's your understanding what that criticism is?
Well, what I believe she was saying is that I should have ran Q scores for these allegedly comparable actors after each of their breakout films, which I disagree. First of all, Q scores doesn't work like that. Q scores are available twice a year, so it's not that I could pick a month or a different month for each of the Q score actors. So I feel that, what was important for me, and this doesn't always happen when I'm using Q scores, you can get this perfect moment in time, as Ms. Heard said, but as Ms. Arnold said, that, Aquaman was Ms. Heard's breakout moment. So these scores reflect that breakout moment, and they're terrible Q scores.
How would your analysis change if you had used Ms. Arnold's logic with respect to the timing of the Q scores that you looked at?
I mean, if you really think about what Ms. Arnold was saying, is she's saying that she thinks Q scores are the highest for each actor right after their breakout moment. So I would think, if anything, these Q scores could have been a bit lower, because it's not right after their breakout moment. But what's important for me is the fact that these scores reflect, who Amber Heard was at the time before the Waldman statements, but after the Aquaman release.
We can take that one down, Tom. Thank you. What other work have you done in connection with forming your opinions in this case?
Again, taking the advice from Ms. Arnold, it's important. She says the industry looks into social media, what their followings are like, with the numbers as it relates to their followers. Again, what is the public perception of them? So I analyzed their social media accounts, but prior to the Waldman statement. So.
And how did you do that?
Yeah, so what I did, I don't know if you're all familiar with the archive.org. They have a tool called the Wayback Machine. What archive.org does is it archives the internet. So you can go back in time to see what websites and web pages used to look like in the past. Not all the time can you actually get a celebrity's social media accounts to have been archived, but we were fortunate that each of the alleged comparable actors' social media accounts were in archive.org. So I was able to go back in time prior to the Waldman statements to see what the following activity was for each of the alleged comparable actors.
Mr. Bania, did you prepare a demonstrative that reflects your social media analysis?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, ma'am.
No objection to the demonstrative?
All right, we'll mark it for identification purposes, plaintiffs 1297 and publish.
Mr. Bania, could you tell the jury what you found when you looked at the social media?
Yeah, so what I found, again, this is prior to the Waldman statements. First thing you're going to notice here is not all actors use social media. You're going to see Mr. Pine doesn't have Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and Momoa and Darmus don't use Facebook or Twitter. But what's important to look at is you have Ms. Heard prior to the Waldman statements with 3.8 Instagram followers and 142,500 Twitter followers. And then you move down to Gal Gadot with 37 million Instagram followers compared to her 3.8 million, and 2.3 million Twitter followers compared to Ms. Heard's 142,000. And you can then even go down to Zendaya with 65.9 and 17.2 million Twitter followers. What this is telling me is really, more people are interested in Ms. Gadot and Zendaya and even Mr. Momoa than Ms. Heard on social media. It just tells me a lot of people are interested in these actors as opposed to Ms. Heard, more of a following. Q scores, well-liked, less disliked. So it kind of fits into the analysis of determining whether or not these alleged comparable actors are actually comparable.
Based on your expertise, what are your overall opinions about Ms. Arnold's analysis of the so-called comparable actors?
Yes, again, it appears that she's abandoned this approach, and I agree with that. I feel that, through the Q-score analysis and the social media analysis, that they're just not comparable.
Tom, we can take that one down. Mr. Bania, based on all the analysis you did in this case, what are your overall opinions?
Yes, my overall opinions are that Mr. Schnell failed to prove any causal connection with the Waldman statements and the search or the hashtag activity, those spikes as it relates to Twitter. There's no causal connection there. My second opinion is, based on my social media and Q-score analysis, Ms. Arnold's alleged comparable actors are not comparable. And then third, Ms. Arnold and Mr. Schnell both failed to prove any causation as it relates to the Waldman statements causing economic harm to Ms. Heard. So, as a damages expert, which Ms. Arnold is, you need to take into consideration causation before you can calculate damages. You look at damages and you look at this allegedly damaging event, and not only do you have to prove that 100% of the damages because of these Waldman statements, she didn't even consider COVID. It happened at the same time. A lot of actors probably made a lot less money because of COVID. Maybe films didn't get made. And, when you do an analysis of damages, you prove causation, but you also have to look at everything else that might have caused this alleged economic harm. And she didn't look into any of that. She didn't even know what causation was. So I don't think damages is an appropriate approach in this case.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Mr. Bania.
Hi.
Yeah, you're not a damages expert, correct?
I am a damages expert, but not providing any quantitative damages opinions in this case.
In this case, okay. And is it your testimony that only if a person repeats the Waldman Depp statements could they be related to the defamation?
Say that one more time?
Are you saying that a person literally has to repeat the Waldman Depp statements in a tweet for them to be related to the defamation?
No, if you looked at my analysis, I did pick the three themes as it relates to the tweets, and I analyzed those themes, and I came up with 5 examples of when those themes were used.
And you ran searches for, quote, abuse hoax, sexual violence hoax, and fake sexual violence, and you ran all those in quotes, correct?
I did.
So only if a person used a tweet with those words in that order And with that spacing, would they hit on your searches, correct?
Objection, compound.
Overruled.
Yeah, so I used them in quotes because, hoax could be used in many other contexts. So I wanted to make sure I was fitting my search with the theme of the Waldman statements.
So if someone tweeted Ms. Heard faked sexual violence, that wouldn't appear in your searches, correct? Faked with an ED.
It would not.
Okay. And if they use two spaces between abuse and hoax, that wouldn't fit in your search.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you? And a tweet can only be 280 characters, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So certain of the Waldman Depp statements, a person could not tweet the whole thing in one tweet, correct? The whole statement in one tweet.
The Waldman statements?
Correct.
No, you could not
Okay.
tweet those entire quotes.
Did you make any determination if there was an online bullying campaign against Mr. Depp after Ms. Heard's op-ed?
I didn't look into any online bullying campaign for Ms. Heard nor Mr. Depp.
Did you determine if there were tweets harassing Mr. Depp that quoted from Ms. Heard's op-ed?
No, my assignment was to determine if the Waldman statements were part of the tweets that Mr. Schnell provided. I was rebutting him.
And in your analysis of when you testified before, you never looked to see if the op-ed was quoted anywhere, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
All right, questions withdrawn. Next question.
Now, you have no objection to Ms. Arnold's use of comparables, correct? Just the use of comparables in general.
I listened to her testimony and my understanding that she abandoned that approach. But as it relates to my testimony today, my opinion was related to those specific alleged comparable actors, that they were not comparable.
You're not offering an opinion as to who the appropriate comparables should be to Ms. Heard, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you testified just before about the Q scores of Ms. Heard and the comparables. That was Plaintiff's Exhibit 1296, correct?
I don't know what 1296 means.
Okay. The demonstrative in front of you.
Mine? Yes, that's correct.
And you said that those were all for the winter of 2019?
I said Ms. Heard's were from the winter of 2019.
Because isn't it true that none of the rest of these people were from the winter of 2019, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. In fact, Mr. Momoa's was from the summer of
2020?
Of 2020?
That's correct. Not all alleged comparable actors had Q scores for that date. What was important for me is to get Ms. Heard's Q scores right after Aquaman, but before the Waldman statements.
So you weren't comparing apples to apples, correct?
I wouldn't say that. I'm saying that it's not the exact same years.
Well, so in the winter of 2019, that Q score comes out. That the field work dates for that is from January 22nd, 2019 to February 7th, 2019, correct?
That is correct.
So that would be so the field work would be starting almost immediately after Aquaman just came out, correct?
Yeah, in her Star is Born moment, yes.
You'd agree that for the winter of 2020, where you took Jason Momoa's Q score, would have more time to account for the rise in popularity of the film Aquaman, correct?
Well, actually, if I use Ms. Arnold's suggestion, the celebrities tend to have, the celebrity moment right after they have their breakout film. So I disagree with that. I think maybe his Q scores could be lower as it relates to when I use them.
You'd agree that for the winter of 2020, Mr. Momoa's Q score would have more time to account for the rise in popularity of the film Aquaman?
I don't know if it accounts for the rise of popularity. Again, using Ms. Arnold's words, usually a Q score will be the highest right after the film, like I did measure Ms. Heard.
All right. Do you show? Thank you.
If you look on page 177 of your deposition transcript, you see that?
I don't see a page. Is that what you handed me?
You don't see page 177? I think it's 4 pages. 4 pages per.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And I asked you at lines 6 through 10, you'd agree that for the winter of 2020, Jason Momoa's Q-score would have more time to account for the rise of popularity in the film Aquaman, and you answered yes.
At that time, as I am a rebuttal expert to Ms. Arnold, based on her testimony, I've learned something new from her.
Okay. You didn't look at Ms. Heard's Q-score for summer of 2020, correct?
She doesn't have any.
And Ms. De Armas had a lower familiarity score than Ms. Heard, correct?
If I don't have that in front of me, but if you're saying that, yes.
Okay. And Ms. De Armas's career trajectory has gone up since the summer of 2020, correct?
I don't know. I didn't analyze her career trajectory.
Okay. Could you put up plaintiff's trial exhibit 1297? That was the demonstrative. Ms. De Armas has less Instagram followers than Ms. Heard, correct?
Correct.
And Ms. Heard has more than double the Instagram followers of Ms. De Armas, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that you get more social media followers the longer you're on social media?
Not necessarily. It doesn't work that way. It depends on many other factors.
And so Ms. De Armas had a lower familiarity score and less Instagram followers, yet your testimony is that she would not be a proper comparable to Ms. Heard?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're not offering a different set of people who should be comparables, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. You can take that down. Now, you understand that Mr. Waldman has been banned from Twitter for life for harassing Amber Heard, correct?
I don't know that, but if that's the case.
And you understand that Mr. Waldman appealed the decision to Twitter and they have confirmed his ban for life?
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach on this one?
Okay, sure.
You agree that in looking at Mr. Schnell's data, 65% of the uses of negative hashtags relating to Ms. Heard occurred between April 1st, 2020 and June 15th, 2021, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you would agree that 5 of the 6 highest spikes of the negative hashtags were after the Depp Waldman statements, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And where you talked about the February 2020 spike, and the 65%, by the way, even includes the February 2020 spike of tweets, correct?
That's correct. Well, there was no spike in Feb 2020 during the Waldman statements.
Well, the spike in February 2020 was before the Waldman statements, right?
I would have. Can we pull up the chart again if you want to talk about the spikes?
Sure. Can you put up 1294? Number one.
Number one. Yeah, that spike happened before the Waldman statements.
Okay. And there was hardly any activity in negative hashtags until February 2020, correct?
That's correct.
And you understand that the spike in February 2020 was related to the partial tape that Mr. Waldman and Mr. Depp leaked to the Daily Mail, right?
I'm aware that the articles were related to Heard admitting to hitting Depp.
And you understand that Mr. Waldman testified that Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman met with the Daily Mail in person to provide the partial tape to the Daily Mail.
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay, he talked about what the number one related to.
What's the objection?
Sorry, lack of foundation and
I'm asking if he knows or he doesn't.
All right, we'll
So what's important to me is the fact that this spike is prior to the Waldman statements.
Do you know if Mr. Waldman testified that Mr. Depp and he met with the Daily Mail in person to provide the partial tape?
No.
In February of 2020. You don't know one way or the
It's
other.
irrelevant to my opinion.
Okay. And the spike in July of 2020 came right after the last defamatory statement by Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman, correct?
The July spike, which is number 2, is not related to the Waldman statements, and there are articles related to abuse between Heard and Depp and feces found in Depp's bed.
And that's based on Google searches you did?
That's correct.
Okay. And the July spike in time came after the June 27, 2020 defamatory statement by Mr. Depp and Mr. Waldman, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And 5 of the 6 spikes came after the defamatory statements, correct?
After the Waldman statements, yes.
Okay. Now, you testified before that you eliminated shares and likes of the Depp-Waldman statements from your analysis, right?
Repeat that, please.
Did you say that you eliminated shares and likes of tweets that included the Depp-Waldman statements?
That's correct. When I was doing my analysis, I noticed the exact same text was a part of many of these tweets.
Don't shares and likes disseminate the negative information?
That's quite possible.
Okay. And you agree, right, that use of the term Waldman or Waldmanian occurred over 25% of the time in the negative tweets toward Ms. Heard from April 2020 through January 2021, correct?
Although it's irrelevant to this case, it has nothing to do with the Waldman statements. That's what Mr. Schnell says.
You don't disagree with the search results, correct?
Although has nothing to do with this case or the Waldman statements, I do not disagree.
So if people are tweeting about Adam Waldman or Waldmanian at the same time as tweeting negative hashtags about Amber Heard, it's your testimony that they have nothing to do with this case?
The hashtags have nothing to do with this case.
That's what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And even if they include the negative hashtags with Mr. Waldman's name and Waldmanian, you're saying they have nothing to do with the defamatory statements?
All 4 hashtags that Snell used had nothing to do with the Waldman statements. Waldman himself has nothing to do with the Waldman statements. We're talking about the Waldman statements here. Waldmanian, I don't even know what that is, but again, it has nothing to do with this case, and it's not related to the Waldman statements. That's what's important.
And the reason you're saying they're not related to the Waldman statements is because someone didn't literally copy what Adam Waldman said in the Daily Mail and tweet it out?
Well, I looked at enough tweets that included the name Waldman that have nothing to do with anything negative or the Waldman statements.
No, they must have had to have the negative hashtags toward Ms. Heard, because the only way that those would have been in the data you looked at would have had the negative hashtags towards Ms. Heard. It was looking at that universe, correct?
Well, first of all, I don't agree that justice for Johnny Depp is a negative hashtag towards Amber Heard. So listen, the assignment was to determine if the tweets that Mr. Schnell presented were related or included the Waldman statements.
In your review of the tweets related to Ms. Heard, you cannot point to any that were positive toward Ms. Heard, correct?
Again, I was not looking for that.
And you did not review the hashtag Justice for Johnny Depp during the time frame from April 1st, 2020 to January 1st, 2020 to see if there were any that were not negative toward Ms. Heard?
I did not look into anything as it relates to anything other than what relates to the Waldman statements. That's what's at issue here today as we sit in court.
Okay. And you didn't form any statistical analysis to rule out the Waldman statements' impact on the hashtags, correct?
Correct.
You did not analyze whether media and press coverage other than the Waldman statements affected Ms. Heard's career, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Looking at the exhibit that's in front of you, where you have the numbers here, those you said are related to Google searches?
The 1 through 6?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. And can we put up plaintiff's 888? And we could just start at 1. Do you understand that your... Okay. Oh, thanks. And 888, it's page 76. These are the documents you relied upon for your opinion today?
Yes.
And are these the search, where it has the different letters, these are the searches that you ran for the various time frames and the articles that came up for numbers 1 through 6, correct?
No, I mean, obviously document 1A is the Heard supplemental expert witness disclosure. These are documents that I used throughout the time I've been working on this project. So these aren't related to those 1 through 6 numbers.
Okay. These are documents you relied upon for your opinion today?
These are documents that I relied upon when I presented my designation.
For your opinion today, that you're offering today?
Yeah, these are the documents that, yes, I've relied on throughout this case.
Okay. And actually, Michelle, could you turn in this designation to, let's see. Hold on one second. Can you just scroll down? Yeah, keep scrolling. Just keep going. Keep going. Okay, stop. This was the chart you provided with your designation for your opinions in this case, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And it's similar to the chart that we had before with the 1 through 6, correct?
That's correct.
And where it has the various boxes, it's talking about documents 6E through 6H, for instance, related to Depp wanting to have Heard replaced on Aquaman.
Yes.
And you prepared this chart, correct?
Yeah, this was part of my designation.
I'd like to have this page as a demonstrative.
Your Honor, I do have an objection, if I might be heard.
All right, you want to come forward? Page 99.
I am honestly surprised that there hadn't been any objections prior to this time. It seems like that Amber Heard's attorney on cross is testifying things that were not said into testimony when he's asking the questions. There are things that the way he's phrasing the questions, that was not the testimony of the person that he's attributing them to. So this is very interesting, and I'm, about the objections, and they needed to come faster, in my opinion. But hey, that's my opinion. And also, one thing that it seems like this is proving is that Amber Heard was not very popular. We'll see. Well, they're back.
Mr. Bania. Other than so as I understand it, the way you determined that the tweets were not related to the Waldman statements was that you looked at time and then you ran certain Google searches, correct?
Correct.
And then the top 3 hits came up.
Correct.
And then you looked through the article to see if Waldman statements were there?
So as it relates to any trending event, any defamation that's happened online, any allegations of economic loss because something went viral, going to Google, looking at the spikes in time and going back in time to see what was happening on those top 3 sites will give you an indication of the best results that were being served at that time. So something viral that's happening would appear most likely in those top 3 results.
And just so the record's clear, if we could go back to page 76 of this document. Numbers 6A through 6N, going to the next page, those are the headlines of the searches that you found?
Correct.
And you don't disagree that that negative tweets toward Ms. Heard have continued throughout the analysis of the tweets, correct?
I'm not looking at whether they're negative tweets or those hashtags are negative. I'm determining if those tweets are related to the Waldman statements.
Well, okay, and you have no opinion whether the tweets were positive or negative towards Ms. Heard. That's what you're saying?
Yes, I'm just analyzing whether or not they're related to the Waldman statements.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, redirect.
I have no further questions of this witness, Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Bania.
Yes.
Sir, you can leave the courtroom, or you please.
Thank you.
All right, your next witness. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess for you at this point. Hopefully within 15 minutes we'll get right back to you, okay? Do not discuss the case and don't do any outside. Sorry, do not discuss the case and don't do any outside research. Sorry, we'll just take a short break. All right, so just so that we're on the same page, you can have a seat. Keep standing the whole time. All right, just so we're on the same page with Mr. Knight's testimony. Actually, could Mr. Knight go back out, please? All right, so we're on the same page with Mr. Knight's testimony. There's a rule on witnesses, however, Mr. Knight's a rebuttal witness. The purpose of excluding witnesses from the courtroom, usually it's a courtroom, is to deprive a later witness of the opportunity to shape testimony to correspond with that of an earlier witness. The issue we have here, obviously, if it was a direct witness in the direct testimony, you had time to do a rule on witnesses, let them know about the rule on witnesses. With a rebuttal witness, it's a little different because they didn't know they were going to be a witness. You didn't know they were going to be a witness. I understand that part. The problem is the courtroom in this particular case appears to be the world. So what we have to do here is I'm going to do a voir dire, and I'll allow both sides to ask questions as well of Mr. Knight to see what he has seen of the case. And I'm just going to use the factors that the case law in Virginia uses, which the factors to consider, because the court does have broad discretion to permit or prohibit a witness to testify in this particular circumstance. So the factors I'm going to consider is if the impropriety was intentional, which we'll find out, the prejudice attached to it, also if the excluded witness learned about substantive aspects of the case from an earlier testifying witness, and whether that knowledge had any effect on his or her testimony. So those are the three factors I'm going to look at in weighing this decision. So keep that in mind when you do your voir dire. And it's my understanding that the evidence that Mr. Knight will testify only relates to Hicksville. Is that correct? Okay. All right, now we can have Mr. Knight. All right, sir. Mr. Knight, if you could come forward to be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case and penalty of law?
I do. All right. Sir, if you could just have a seat, please. Sir, what we're doing is I'm just going to ask you a few questions outside the presence of the jury. Then the attorneys are going to ask you a few questions, okay? Sure. Then I'm going to have you step back outside after that, okay?
No problem.
All right. What's your full name, sir?
Morgan Higby Knight.
Okay, you don't have to be that close. All right. All right. How do you spell your last name?
N-I-G-H-T.
Okay. All right. And sir, before I can allow you to testify, I just want to ask you a few questions. Have you seen any of the trial that's been going on for the past 6 weeks?
Approximately 5 weeks ago, a friend of mine texted me that Hicksville was mentioned, and I watched a little clip where it was mentioned.
Which clip did you watch?
I believe it was somebody testifying about, I think it was the security guard testifying maybe about Hicksville, or I forget exactly who was testifying. But it was something where Hicksville was mentioned, and it was about something about a wrist or something like that.
All right. And what did you do after that? At some point, did you get in contact with attorneys?
So I didn't reach out to them. I didn't really care. The innkeepers that worked at Hicksville before reached out to them and said, we saw some stuff that wasn't true, and then they asked, is it okay if I give the attorneys your phone number? So the attorneys reached out to me.
Okay, and when did the attorneys reach out to you?
May 3rd.
May 3rd. And you talked to the attorneys at that time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Camille, but Geraldine.
Okay, and then have you seen any other parts of the trial?
No, she instructed me not to watch anything about it, regardless of if it was about Hicksville or not. So I've been keeping off the internet and turning off anything that seems to be like it's on social media, so I just don't watch any of that.
Okay. All right. And questions, Ms. Prater?
So, Mr. Knight, you were contacted by an attorney for Mr. Depp on May 3rd?
Yes.
Okay. And you said it was Carolyn?
Geraldine.
Oh, Geraldine. I got it. Okay. And what?
I think it's pronounced Geraldine.
Okay. Can you tell us the conversation you had with her at that time?
Yeah, she just asked me my recollection of the evening, and I told her, and she said, okay, would you mind testifying? And I said, sure. And she said, okay, well then, we're not sure if we're going to call you or not, but just in case, please don't watch anything having to do with the case. And I said, I will do.
Now, how is it that, to your best knowledge, how is it that Geraldine was able to get hold of you? How did she know that you knew something?
So, like I said, two of my innkeepers, my innkeeper and my manager, had reached out to her team, I think through email, and one of them texted me and said, hey, do you mind if we give Geraldine your phone number?
Now, you also communicated on Twitter, did you not, about this case?
Yeah, 2 weeks prior to Geraldine reaching out to me, someone had made a comment about something that happened by the fire pit, and I said, that's not my recollection. I didn't see, that's not what I saw.
So who was it that made a comment about something that happened at the fire pit?
So once I was told about the fact that Hicksville was mentioned, I went and did a Twitter search of Hicksville trailer. So it was, I don't know who it was, but I was just like, what are they saying about Hicksville? And so that was why I did a search, just to see, because it was weird and fascinating, because the night to me wasn't that remarkable in the context of all the different experiences I've had at the trailer palace.
So explain to me, please, what you mean by you did a trailer search.
So if you go to Twitter and you put in keywords and do a search, all the tweets regarding that subject come up, or anything with those keywords in it. So that is how I found the tweet that I replied to.
Okay. And how many tweets did you find that mentioned Hicksville when you did that trailer search?
Probably like 5 or 6. I only replied to one of them.
Okay. And what do you recall those tweets saying about Hicksville?
The one that I replied to said that there was some incident by the fire pit, and Johnny was yelling at Amber, and I replied that I didn't see that. I was there all night, and I was working that night, so I didn't see anything like that.
So your best recollection on that one was that somebody said somebody was testifying that Johnny was yelling at Amber?
Yeah, and I believe grabbed her or something along those lines.
Do you recall who said Johnny was yelling at Amber and grabbed her?
I have no idea. It was a stranger, so I didn't really pay attention to who was writing it.
All right, and you said that you responded to it. How did you respond to it?
I said that's not what happened. I was there all night. Yeah, basically. I'm paraphrasing. It was a
Did
few
you
months
say
ago.
anything about what you thought happened?
I just said that didn't happen. I didn't say what. I believe I said maybe something along the lines of, from what I saw, Amber was the one acting jealous, not Johnny.
And you said this to one of the tweets.
Yes.
Do you recall whether that was the Umbrella Man?
I don't recall. That's a ridiculous name, though.
Okay, so tell me about the other 5 tweets that you recall seeing when you ran your trailer search.
I think they were similar in nature, but I don't specifically remember the details of them. That was pretty much the only one I remembered, and that's the only one I replied to.
Do you remember anything about the other 5 and what was said?
No.
Okay. When you said that somebody told you about a security guard, what was your understanding of what the security guard said?
I got a text that somebody in the trial had said that they were talking about the Trailer Palace during the trial. And so that's what led me to go on Twitter and do a search.
And did you have any communications with the 2 innkeepers about what you knew or what you thought?
No, I haven't talked to them in years, and still haven't regarding the case.
So how is it that the innkeepers then contacted you and said, do you mind if we give you the telephone number to the attorneys?
Because they still have me in their phone, and Christy, who was the manager at the time, is the one that texted me and said, hey, do you mind if we pass this along? Mr. Depp's attorneys want to talk to you.
Do you mind if we pass what along?
Your phone number.
Right, but how is it that, what is the communication you had with the innkeepers that even led them to understand that you believed you had knowledge about Hicksville, the Hicksville incident?
There was no conversation. They knew because they were both working that same night. Jenna was the innkeeper and she was there along with me that night. Christy was the one who texted me and she had come in the following morning for her shift. And I slept over. I was live-in innkeeper that night.
So I'm trying to understand. So just based on the fact that 7 years ago, they happened to know that you were working that night.
9 years ago, and it's because I was there
Okay.
with them.
My math, well, it's 2022 right now, and that was what year? Oh, that was
2013.
You're right. Okay. So how is it that out of the blue they remembered 9 years ago that you worked there that night and that you might have some knowledge?
I mean, to be honest, like we do get celebrities sometimes, but it was, it's not that unmemorable. It's not like it's any other night of the week. So I'm sure they remembered the specifics of that night.
Had Mr. Depp's attorneys ever attempted to contact you before?
No,
Had you ever attempted to contact Mr. Depp's attorneys before?
no, I had no interest.
All right. Have you had any conversations with Mr. Depp's attorneys other than the one you described with Geraldine?
Since?
Yes.
Well, I met with Camille last night.
All right. And what was that conversation? Please describe.
I just went through, the story again that I had told Geraldine.
And let's hear what that story was.
You want me to go through
Yes.
the whole story?
Your Honor, we would object to attorney work product.
There's no attorney work product.
No, I'll overrule that.
All right.
objection. That's fine. That's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah,
Please
sure.
continue.
That I described like them getting to the trailer palace, me showing them around, the interactions I had when I was on duty with Mr. Depp and Miss Heard, how the evening progressed throughout the night, the levels of drinking and drug use that I witnessed, what the state of the damaged trailer the next morning, and basically just, the details that I had only, spent total 45 minutes to an hour with Mr. Depp and Miss Heard throughout the entire course of the night. So it was my recollection of those events during that time.
And what did Ms. Vasquez say to you?
Your Honor, this is beyond, we object on the grounds that it's beyond the scope of the voir dire,
No,
which is
I
limited
think
to the
whatever
three
she said
criteria.
to him
But
is
may I
very
please finish
critical.
stating my objection, Your Honor?
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
The objection is that it's beyond the scope of the voir dire. Your Honor enumerated the three criteria which are relevant here. And this is a rebuttal witness, so
Your Honor, whatever Ms. Vasquez shared with him is going to be very important here because they knew by this time he was going to be a witness. So.
Well, that was last night. So how
Right.
does that fit into one of the three factors of deciding whether or not he's going to testify?
Well, one of the three factors, Your Honor, may I approach so that the witness doesn't hear?
Okay, that's fine.
Mr. Knight, did
Yes.
Ms. Vasquez provide you with any information that anyone had testified to or said at any point?
No, she didn't talk about anything except for asking me my experience and just getting a clear understanding of what my experience was. She didn't mention anything outside of the scope of what I saw, and just asked me for the facts and told me, just tell the truth and let me know,
Do you know what any of the witnesses said in this trial?
about, outside of what I described earlier with a friend of mine texting that someone was talking about Trailer Palace, I do not.
Do you know whether any of the witnesses testified about any jealousy?
Other than the tweet that I replied to, no.
All right. Thank you. Your Honor, may we approach?
All right, well, do you have any questions? All right, sir, if you could have a seat back outside the courtroom.
Sure.
Thank you.
Can I leave my water?
Yes, you can leave your water.
Wow, 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 wowzer. It's a surprise witness that is on rebuttal. So evidently this gentleman has some information, and the judge has questioned this witness and Amber Heard's attorney so that they can determine whether or not he can testify. He says that he was there the night of the Huntsville incident, that he was working. We are interested in seeing whether or not the judge is going to allow his testimony in. This is Johnny Depp rebuttal witness. It's amazing how court is sometimes. So they found him on, they didn't find him on Twitter, but he replied to a tweet, and his old co-workers contacted him and said, do you mind if we forward your contact information over to the Depp team since you were there that night? And he's also, replied to a tweet. He was very transparent as to what he's seen and what he's heard regarding the trial beforehand. He was probably like any of us. We didn't, we were looking at the trial, or he wasn't looking at the trial. He was on Twitter responding to something and hadn't seen any of the trial. But due to the fact that he had information, that is why he was contacted. His coworkers asked if they could forward his information over to the Depp team. Now, this is very interesting. We'll see whether or not the judge allows him to testify, and because he will be used as a rebuttal witness as to the testimony of Amber Heard's what transpired, and her witnesses as to what transpired at Hicksville. Now, in fairness, he is a neutral witness because he doesn't have a ball in this game, either for Johnny Depp nor Amber Heard. So his testimony probably will be, maybe credible. I don't know. I'm sure if he's allowed to testify, that the judge is going to give the jury some special instructions regarding his testimony, because of the nature that he has been exposed to social media content regarding this trial. And, it's good that he was honest about replying on social media, on Twitter, because, they find out everything. So it's just best to be honest, tell the truth. And that is how it is done. Just tell the truth. So we're waiting for the judge to decide this and what is going to be done and how this is going to be decided. I wonder what he has to say. He did make it. One thing also that we find interesting is how Amber Heard's team tried to get him to state exactly what was discussed, verbatim. And I'm sure that they objected to that, and which makes sense, because then the whole game plan. There's got to be an element of surprise or something. So we will see what will happen. Now, his name is I've typed it, Morgan Knight, and he worked in Hicksville at the trailers during this time. So we will see. We will see. Now, okay. All right, they're going back. Let me jump backstage and see what's going to happen.
All right. So based on weighing the factors, I'm going to allow Mr. Knight to testify. If we could get Mr. Knight back in. Now, if I knew you were going to do a sidebar, I wouldn't have made him leave. I never know. All right, sir, if you could just stay up, you could just stay there while we get the jury, okay? All right, are we ready for the jury? Okay.
John.
Thank you. Yeah. We're going to swear him in again in front of the jury, okay? Be seated. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize for the interruption. You're going to notice as we get closer to the end of the testimony, you're probably going to have some more interruptions, and I apologize for that, but there's just some matters we have to take up outside your presence, okay? All right, thank you. All right, your next witness. All right, Mr. Knight, if you could come forward to be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law?
I do. Sir, if you could have a seat.
Good afternoon, Mr. Knight.
Good afternoon, Camille.
Would you please state your full name for the record?
Morgan Higby Knight.
Mr. Knight, where are you from?
I live in Los Angeles, California.
And what do you do for a living?
So I currently own and run Hicksville Pines Bud and Breakfast in Idlewild, California. And I created and ran Hicksville Trailer Palace in Joshua Tree, California, starting in 2009.
And how is Hicksville Pines Bud and Breakfast different from Hicksville Trailer Palace?
So Hicksville Pines Bud and Breakfast is up in the mountains of Idlewild, which is a beautiful snow town above Palm Springs. And all the units are A-frames instead of trailers, which we have. It's obviously a very different climate than Joshua Tree, which is a desert area. The rooms, which are themed at both places, are trailers, vintage trailers from the 50s through the 70s at Hicksville Trailer Palace. So there's also different kind of amenities. There's a pool in Joshua Tree. There's a rec room up at Hicksville Pines.
When did you first become the owner of the Trailer Palace?
Trailer Palace, I started building it in 2009. It took about a year with my collaborator, Stephen Butcher, and on the trailers. And we got done and opened in 2010.
Did there come a time that you sold the Hicksville Trailer Palace?
Yeah, I did at the beginning of 2020. I had some health issues and it was too much to run both at the same time. So I chose Idlewild because it was newer and shinier.
And just for my sake, how long did you own the Trailer Palace?
So 10 years of us being open, 11 years total.
And what was the Hicksville Trailer Palace?
So it started out as a artist retreat. I was a filmmaker at the time and wanted a place to get away and work on film projects outside of Los Angeles. I also put in a recording studio so musicians could record records there. I had lived in New Orleans for 5 years, and there's an amazing recording studio there called Kingsway, where all the musicians would come and they'd live in this big mansion and record their records. And I just thought that was a really neat thing for artists to be able to get away and create whatever they were working on. Over the course of the build out of all the trailers, themed trailers, which I'm a huge fan of this hotel called Madonna Inn. And so I wanted to do really detailed themed trailers. It became too expensive to just make a living off of an artist retreat. So I decided before I was done to make it a hotel as well.
And what were your job responsibilities, generally speaking, when you owned the Hicksville Trailer Palace?
So I would be live-in manager some nights, a couple nights a week. I would also drive out from Los Angeles twice a week and bring supplies that you can't get out in the Yucca Valley area and Joshua Tree. There's just a lot of things like, Smart and Finals, Costco's and stuff. So I would drive that stuff out. There's also no USPS, so sometimes I'd have to get things shipped to my house and drive them out as well. I would also just do constantly building and creating new stuff at Trailer Palace, whether it's new trailers or amenities. So I would be working on that stuff as well. I'm a big fan of the fact that Disneyland is always making it better and better.
And when you were the live-in manager, does that mean that you spent the night at the Hicksville Trailer Palace?
Yeah, we have a house on site where the recording studio was, and there's a bedroom in there. So whoever is live-in manager those nights stays in the house and basically lives there. There's a kitchen and everything.
Have you ever met the plaintiff in this case, Mr. Depp?
I had met him really briefly at the Viper Room in the late 90s. I had worked with some of the people that performed there and was good friends with Squirrel Robin from the Pussycat Dolls and some other friends in this band, The Imposters. So I was there and I met him once.
How about Miss Heard? Ever met her?
I had never met her before. They were guests at the hotel.
When was the first time that you met Mr. Depp and Miss Heard together?
In late May 2013, when they were guests, Mr. Depp's assistant Nathan had rented out the entire place so they could have a night there in privacy.
And what do you recall, if anything, about Mr. Depp and Miss Heard's arrival to the Hicksville Trailer Palace?
Mr. Depp got lost, so his security guard, who arrived early, asked me if I could go fetch them because he had an old car that didn't really fare on the dirt roads out there, which are pretty horrible. So I went out and made sure that they got themselves and the car back to Hicksville safely.
Do you remember approximately at what time that was?
It was 3 to 4 in the afternoon.
What was Mr. Depp's demeanor when they first arrived?
At Trailer Palace, he was super excited about the place, really complimentary, just had a lot of questions and seemed like he was in a really great mood.
And how about Miss Heard's demeanor? Anything stick out?
She was pretty quiet. She just kind of didn't say that much when I was giving them the tour of the grounds and the trailer.
And was anyone else with Mr. Depp and Miss Heard when they first arrived?
There's people that are arriving throughout the afternoon. So there was, I think 10 to 12 people total ended up staying. The security guard had gotten there earlier and just to check out the place. but yeah.
And did I understand your testimony previously that the entire trailer park was rented out by Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
Yeah, the whole place slept, I believe at the time, about 25 people, but there was only 10 to 12 in this party.
And who was part of that party besides Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
I'm really horrible with names, but I remember one of them was Ms. Heard's sister and the security guard I mentioned before, but I honestly forgot his name too.
What happened when Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard first came onto the property?
So I gave them a tour of, we give all guests a tour of their specific trailer and the grounds, and show them around the, when someone rents the whole place, they get another trailer called the bar trailer, which is basically a place to set up their alcohol and stuff, and some people in the group were just putting their beverages in that area.
And where were you when Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard, did there come a time when Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard went to the bar trailer?
I didn't notice most of the time that my interactions with them, everything's kind of centrally located, so there's a fire pit, bar trailer, and picnic tables all right in the same area, so they were generally around that area the entire evening that I saw them.
And what did you observe of Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard as the evening progressed?
So Mr. Depp was just super curious and really nice. He was also really interested in my innkeeper because she was a musician, so they would talk about music a lot. At one point, the innkeeper who lived at the next door property went home and grabbed her guitar, and they had sung a song or two around the campfire in the early evening. There was another instance where Mr. Depp, the innkeeper, her name was Jenna, and myself were talking about books and music, and Ms. Heard came over and kind of interjected. She seemed a little annoyed that Mr. Depp wasn't spending time with her.
What about Ms. Heard's demeanor made you think that she was annoyed?
I think just generally she, it's hard, like I think, I don't know, it was just like a gut reaction, like I can't describe it, but, you know.
How long were you with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard that evening, generally?
So throughout the course of the evening, I was probably mostly with Mr. Depp, but 45 minutes to an hour total. So it was, yeah, that's over the whole course until the end of the night after the check-in.
Okay. And did you have an opportunity to observe Mr. Depp interact with other people, guests on the property that evening?
Yes, I saw him hanging out with a security guard at one point, and outside of the time that him and Jenna were singing around the campfire, he was off by himself a lot of the time, and Ms. Heard was over at the campfire with her friends and seemed to have a good time.
And if you haven't already, can you generally describe for the jury your observations of Ms. Heard that evening?
Yeah, she seemed to be having a really nice time with her friends around the campfire. And yeah, everyone was in a pretty good mood.
Did there come a time in the evening that you observed Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard have a disagreement or an argument?
Yes. I was speaking with Mr. Depp, just one-on-one, talking about Hicksville, and Ms. Heard came over and she said that I want to talk to you, and seemed really upset about something. So I went and back in the house because it was really, they went off on their own, and she started yelling at him, and I didn't want to hear it. It honestly was really triggering because I've been in an emotionally abusive relationship before.
Objections. Move to strike.
What's the objection?
You're up, you may reproach.
Okay, sure.
Mr. Knight, will you please just explain for us what you observed when you saw Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard having an argument?
Yes. So Ms. Heard asked him to go talk off to the side, and she was upset at him and she was yelling at him. And I personally had been in
Objection.
All right, I'll sustain the objection.
Okay.
If you could just explain to the jury what you observed when you saw Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard having an argument.
Okay. He was kind of cowering and seemed almost afraid, and it was really like odd to see because he was older than her, obviously. So, but I just went back in the house because I didn't
Objection. To what he did.
All right, I'll sustain as to.
Understood. So after you observed the argument, fair to say you went back to your house on site?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay. What happened after that?
So when I saw Mr. Depp on my next rounds, he apologized profusely and said, "I'm really sorry about that." She was upset.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustain. Next question.
What, if any, type of reaction did Mr. Depp have?
He was just really...
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. He's going to say it again.
It's the reaction, it's not the statement.
All right, if you could make that clear, that's fine.
Just what type of physical reaction did Mr. Depp have after the argument between Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard?
He honestly, throughout the rest of the night, became a lot more quiet and was just very more petulant. In the beginning of the night, he was a lot more outgoing and extroverted, and throughout, as the course of the night went on, he was less and less so and more quiet.
Did you observe any of the guests consuming alcohol while on the property?
I assume they were. I mean, people had cups and there was alcohol set up in the bar trailer, but I didn't physically see them pour alcohol into their cup and cup go into the mouth per se.
Did you witness Mr. Depp drink any alcohol that evening?
I couldn't say.
Anything about Mr. Depp's demeanor that made you think he was perhaps intoxicated?
Yes, as the night went on, I am a former bar owner, so even though I wasn't drinking that night, I'm very familiar with the signs. So just as the night went on, like I said, he became more and more quiet, but he also, as we would have conversations, his head would kind of sway a little bit back and forth, which was a little, he was much less sharp than he was earlier in the night.
Did Ms. Heard appear intoxicated to you?
She did. She seemed, I think when she was angry at him, it seemed like she was intoxicated, but that's just based on my experience and my own personal trauma dealing with abuse.
Okay. Objection, Your Honor, move to strike.
All right, I'll sustain the objection. We'll strike it from the record. Please disregard that testimony.
Did you observe anyone do or take drugs?
I did not.
Did you witness Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard interact other than the argument that you previously described for the jury?
At the end of the night, I heard a commotion. I was inside the house and came out. I couldn't tell what was going on. And Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard were having a discussion about I'm not sure what, but then they went to their trailer. At that point, a lot of people had already gone to bed. So it just kind of petered out. Everyone went to bed, including myself, and I didn't hear anything else the rest of the night.
What time did the evening come to an end?
I'd say it was almost around 3 a.m.
Did you ever see Mr. Depp grab anyone?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
Did you ever see Mr. Depp become physical with anyone?
Objection, leading.
Sustained. Next question.
Did you ever witness Mr. Depp get angry that evening?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What, if anything, happened the next morning?
The next morning, we have checkout at noon at the time, before COVID. And so around 11 o'clock, one of my innkeepers let me know that there was some damage.
Objection, hearsay.
Did something happen that caused you to go to Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's trailer?
Yes, I was informed that.
Objection, hearsay.
It's not being offered for the truth, Your Honor. I mean, may we approach on this one
Okay,
topic?
sure.
Thank you. What, if anything, happened the next morning, Mr. Knight?
The innkeepers let me know that there was some damage in one of the trailers, and it happened to be Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's trailer. So I wanted to inspect the trailer because I was extremely worried. All those trailers that Steve and I worked on were like my babies, and the one they were staying in was the only one that was mostly original and restored 1950s style, and so I was very concerned.
So what did you observe when you went to the trailer?
I observed that there was a light sconce by the bathroom in the bedroom that had been broken off the wall, and a couple pieces were on the floor, and they were, it was basically just broken. The light fixture was hanging on the wall still, except for the pieces that were on the floor.
Did you come to understand how that happened?
Objection, foundation, and
All right,
light.
foundation, also seen as the foundation, how he knew.
Did you ask how the sconce was broken?
Objection, hearsay.
Sustained.
How often do light fixtures in the trailers break?
They break pretty often. I mean, it's not like a usual thing, but things in the trailers generally get broken because it's all vintage trailers, and I would say as much as every couple weeks there's some incident of damage in one of the trailers. In this case, Mr. Depp had told me that.
Objection,
Sustained
hearsay.
objection.
So anyway, yes.
Beyond the light fixture, was anything else in the trailer damaged?
No, everything else looks fine. In fact, we have something we call a piggy fee that we address to guests, that if there's anything what we call inconsiderate or unusually large messes, we charge them extra for it for a $25 an hour cleaning fee, but they did not receive one of those because everything outside of the light fixture looks fine.
And what was your reaction to seeing the damaged light fixture?
To be honest, I was relieved because it was not a big deal. There was already another light in the room, so I just tucked the wires in the wall until I had a few months later time to buy, it was matching sconce with another one in the room. So I had to, on eBay, find a matching pair that would fit there, and when I finally got around to it, I was able to get that and charge it to Nathan, whose credit card I had.
And what was your understanding of who Nathan was?
Mr. Depp's assistant.
Okay. And what did you charge Nathan or Mr. Depp for replacing that pair of light fixtures?
The pair came out to $62.
Okay. While you were on site, Mr. Knight, did you ever wear a mesh shirt?
No, I would absolutely never wear that.
At any time during Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard's stay on the property, did you see Mr. Depp become physical with anyone?
I did
Objection,
not.
leading.
Overruled. That's
I'm sorry, that answer was,
I never saw Mr. Depp get physical with anyone when I saw him.
thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Knight, you are a pretty big fan of Johnny Depp, aren't you?
I am not. To be honest, throughout the evening, I
Sorry, I just asked you one question.
Oh, I
didn't ask you
apologize.
the rest of that.
I
You
apologize.
wanted to participate in this trial, didn't you?
I did not. I
You
was
knew-
asked by the attorney, and I wanted to. They asked me, and I said I'll be happy to come and tell the truth.
You knew this was on camera, that it was being broadcast to a lot of people, and you saw testimony, did you not, in this case? And you seized the moment and responded to the umbrella guy, the lead person for Mr. Depp's Twitters. Did you not?
Objection, Your Honor. Argumentative compound.
Overruled.
Mr. Umbrella Guy is the lead. The lead.
You
what?
know that he leads one of the most predominant pro-Depp Twitters out there.
I have no idea. I don't care or follow the Umbrella Guy.
In fact, you do follow a Twitter called Johnny Depp fan, don't you?
Absolutely not.
You don't? That's your testimony under oath?
It is my testimony under oath.
All right. And on April 21st, Mr. Depp testified in this case about Hicksville, didn't he?
I wasn't here.
And in fact, you tweeted in response to the umbrella guy on April 21, 22, quote, "That never happened. I was with them all night. Amber was the one acting all jealous and crazy." Do
Yes,
you recall writing that?
I do recall writing that.
Michelle, can
Well,
you bring that up, please? We're going to call it Defendants 1903.
1903.
And I'm going to go ahead and ask you to redact, but leave in the umbrella guy and the date and the bringing in the Hicksville. Your Honor, I'm sorry. While she's working on that, did you write and direct a piece called Matters of Consequence back in 1999?
I did.
And didn't Mr. Depp's first wife, Lorianne Allison, work as a makeup artist on that?
She absolutely did.
And while we're looking at that, 4 days after you tweeted to Umbrella Man,
That was Umbrella Guy.
the umbrella guy. Okay. Well, all right, now we have this up. I'm going to ask you to take a look. What is Defendant's Exhibit 1903? Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and that's from that umbrella guy on 4/21/22, correct?
Correct.
And it says bringing in the Hicksville incident accusations. Do you see that?
I do.
And there's clearly Mr. Depp testifying there, likely a video, right?
Okay.
And you respond, that never happened. I was with them all night. Amber was the one acting all jealous and crazy. Do you see that?
I do.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of Defendants 1903.
Any objection?
Yeah, Your Honor, we believe the first part of the that umbrella guy's tweet should be unredacted for context.
Oh, well,
I have no idea what I was replying to.
It's hearsay. It's rank hearsay, and the context
Your Honor,
is not necessary.
your own approach. Take a look. All right. You can make that redaction. With that redaction, any objection?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, 1903 will be in evidence with, as redacted.
Now, so you reached out to the umbrella guy in this text, this Twitter, right?
I wouldn't call it reaching out.
Okay. And in fact, the umbrella guy is in Mr. Adam Waldman. Do you know who Adam Waldman is?
I have no idea.
Well, he's testified earlier that he talks to the umbrella guy.
That he what? He talks to the umbrella guy?
Yeah, were you aware of that?
I honestly, this sounds like schizophrenia.
Okay. Now, 4 days after this event where you texted, Your Honor, yeah, it's in, okay, good. 4 days after that, you tweeted something pretty nasty about Elon Musk, didn't you?
I did.
Okay, thank you. So you don't like Elon Musk, right?
Objection
Well-
relevance.
I don't know Elon Musk.
Overruled. Thank you.
So that was, the context of that is that he had,
I didn't ask you for the context.
I apologize.
Okay. But you texted something that had swear words in it. Would you agree about Elon Musk?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk about your recollections here. 45 minutes to an hour. Your recollection is that Mr. Depp actually drove there?
Yes.
What type of car was he driving?
An old one that was a convertible.
An old convertible?
I'm not a car guy, so I couldn't express the model.
All right. And your recollection was this was May of 2013?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when in May?
Late May.
Okay. Now, you said that you spent a total of 45 minutes to an hour with Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard. Is that correct?
After mostly Mr. Depp, but that's after the tour and after they were checked in throughout the course of the night.
Okay. And you don't recall any of the people that were there other than Ms. Heard's sister and the security guard, correct?
I don't recall any of their names.
Do you remember how many of them were female?
I believe it was predominantly female.
Do you remember how many males were there?
I don't, outside of the security guard.
Do you remember what any of the other people looked like?
They honestly just seemed like youngish hipsters, like for lack of a better term. I know that previously a couple of them had stayed at Hicksville Trailer Palace. That's how they knew about the place.
Okay. So you don't recall seeing how much anybody had to drink that night, correct?
I did not witness that.
And do you recall the use of drugs at all?
I did not witness that.
Okay. Were you sitting at any point with these people at the campfire?
I was not.
Okay. And when you said that you saw Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp, and Ms. Heard was yelling at Mr. Depp, where were they?
She pulled him for a chat, and it was off towards their trailer, like a little bit off towards the dirt.
How many feet were there between the campfire and their trailer?
The campfire and their trailer?
Yes.
Approximately 75.
Okay. So where in that 75 feet did Ms. Heard pull Mr. Depp and yell at him and he cowered?
20.
Okay. 20
from the campfire.
From
not
the
trailer.
campfire.
Yeah.
So your testimony is that Ms. Heard grabbed Mr. Heard, pulled him 20 feet over, yelled at him, and he cowered.
Yes, that's what I witnessed.
And then did they go back?
I went inside the house.
So you don't know whether they returned to the campfire or they returned to their trailer?
I do not.
Okay. And do you know whether there were any disagreements or physical communications, anything of that nature at the campfire?
I do not.
Do you know whether Mr. Depp did anything to anybody else at the campfire?
I didn't see anything.
Okay. Do you know whether Mr. Depp grabbed anybody's wrist and asked them if they knew how many pounds of pressure it took to break their wrist?
I wasn't there the whole time.
Okay. Is it your testimony that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard went last to their trailer? Everybody else went before them?
The rest of the people, I think about half of them had already gone to bed, and it was all around the same time at the end of the night that the rest kind of scattered. There might have been a couple of people that went right after them or right before, but it was all around the same time.
Okay, so your recollection is that when Amber and Johnny Depp went back to their trailer, that dissipated, everybody then left at that point?
Yes.
Okay, now, how far away was your house that you were staying in from the trailer that Amber and Johnny Depp were staying in?
I'd say it was about 75 feet away.
Okay. And the next time that you saw or heard anything was when you went there in the morning and saw the broken sconce. Is that correct?
Yes, I didn't hear anything after I went to bed.
Okay. And that's the extent of your knowledge?
Yes.
Okay. I have no further questions.
All right, redirect.
Mr. Knight, how did you get involved in this trial?
I got a text from one of our old employees who I then talked to for
Objection,
years.
hearsay?
Don't tell us what the text said, just how did you
Okay,
get involved?
I got a text from, I got a,
That's still hearsay, Your Honor.
Okay.
Objection.
Overruled.
Thank you. Go on, Mr. Knight.
I was asked if it was,
No.
Objection,
that.
hearsay?
apologize.
What did you,
I got a
what
text,
did you receive a text? Okay.
yes.
From
and
whom?
From a former employee.
Okay. And how long had it been since you had heard from this former employee?
Approximately 5 years.
And did you contact Mr. Depp or any of his attorneys?
Objection, leading?
Overruled.
I did not.
How did you get in touch with Mr. Depp's attorneys?
They got in touch with me.
Objection, hearsay?
Overruled.
Go on, Mr. Knight.
They reached out to me.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's okay.
I don't have an objection right now.
Thank you.
Only if he talks more.
Next question.
And how do you feel about participating in this trial?
Objection, relevance?
It's extremely relevant considering that they have accused him of being...
Overruled.
Thank you.
How do I feel about it?
Yeah.
I'm happy to tell what I saw, and that's the extent of it. I really don't care outside of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Knight. Nothing
All
further.
right. I assume this witness is not subject to recall. Is that correct? All right. Sir, you're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Your next witness? Or is it going to be a deposition, or is it going to...
Apologies, Your Honor. Thank you. Dr. Shaw.
Okay,
Plaintiff
Dr.
calls
Shaw.
Dr. Shaw.
Okay. Dr. Shaw?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case or penalty of law?
Thank you, sir. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shaw. Can you please state your name for the record?
My name is Richard John Shaw.
Dr. Shaw, can you please describe your educational background?
I'm a psychiatrist. I went to medical school at the University of London in England. I went straight after high school. That's actually the system in the British medical system. I did 2 years of preclinical training and then 3 years of clinical work with patients. Following that, I moved to New Zealand to do an internship. It was an internship in neurology, medicine, surgery, and psychiatry. I spent 3 years in New Zealand, and I did a year of psychiatry residency training. Excuse me. And following that, excuse me. Following that, I moved here to the United States for the first time and did a residency in adult psychiatry at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine, which is in New York. That was 4 years of training in the Bronx. And I also did some subspecialty training in family therapy, couples and family therapy as in my 4th year. And after that, I moved to California, and I've worked at Stanford. I studied at Stanford. I did a fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry, and I've been at Stanford pretty much since then.
Dr. Shaw, what is your current position?
I'm a professor of psychiatry in the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford. I also run what's called the Psychiatry Consult Service at the Children's Hospital at Stanford.
What, if any, professional certifications have you received?
I have what's called board certification in adult and general psychiatry. I obtained that from the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology in 1991. And then I obtained subspecialty board certification in child and adolescent psychiatry in 1993.
Are you a member of any professional organizations in the field of psychiatry?
Yes, I am. I'm a member of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. I'm also a member of the Academy of Consultation Liaison Psychiatry.
How long have you been practicing psychiatry?
If you include my training in psychiatry residency in the US, that would be since 1985.
Is that approximately 35 years?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What percentage of your practice involves treating patients?
Yeah, approximately 3/4 of my time is working with patients. I work in the pediatric hospital, treating a combination of mainly children and adolescents with severe medical conditions, but also working with parents of children who have severe medical conditions. I also consult to the pediatric emergency room, and we evaluate patients who show up with suicide attempts and other serious situations.
What does the remaining quarter of your practice entail?
Well, as a professor, I have to do a number of academic activities. So I do research, I do a lot of teaching, I give lectures, I supervise residents, medical students, and fellows in psychiatry. I do some administrative work. Yeah, so it's a pretty diverse, varied day and week.
Can you tell the jury a little bit about your research and academic work?
Yeah, a lot of my research has involved looking at the issue of trauma and PTSD in parents who have medically fragile children. A lot of these parents are naturally really affected by their child's illness and develop trauma symptoms. So I've developed some interventions to try to help parents, provide support and treatment to reduce their symptoms of trauma.
Have you published articles or books in your area of expertise?
Yes, I have. I've published approximately 70 or probably closer to 80 peer-reviewed manuscripts in different scientific journals. I've also published a number of book chapters on various topics, approximately 30. And I have published 3 textbooks, one of which has gone into a second edition on topics that are related to my area of expertise. And one of them actually is about the treatment of PTSD in parents of premature infants.
Have you published a book through the APA?
Actually, all of those books were published through the APA, the American Psychiatric Association. They have a publishing house, and that's been my publishing company.
What is the APA?
The APA, the American Psychiatric Association, not to be confused with the American Psychological Association, is a professional organization that represents psychiatrists in the U.S. The last time I looked at this, I think there's about 37 or 38,000 members. And the APA has many different roles. One of it is advocacy in psychiatry in the US, but it also has an important role in terms of education. So they host an annual scientific meeting every year in which psychiatrists will present their research. It publishes a number of journals in the field, and from time, well, fairly frequently it publishes guidelines for professional practice or about ethical guidelines that they hope that members will follow as part of their practice.
What ways are you involved with the APA?
Well, I mentioned my publishing. I also present at the scientific meetings. I last presented in 2021 during COVID. It was virtually, but on the topic of group therapy for parents with trauma symptoms. I follow the APA and their various guidelines. I think it's a really influential and important institution.
Going back to your credentials, what, if any, professional awards have you received?
I've been given several teaching awards at Stanford University, and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry that I mentioned honored me with an award for service to my specialty several years ago. I don't remember exactly when.
Have you given any public presentations in the field of psychiatry?
Yes, that's part of our work as an academic psychiatrist, is to lecture, to give presentations. So I present fairly frequently at annual scientific meetings, as I mentioned. I've been invited to give grand round presentations at different medical centers, including University of Pennsylvania and Harvard. So that's just part of our role is to try to educate our colleagues about our work.
Have you testified as an expert in the field of psychiatry before?
Yes, I have.
On how many occasions?
I would estimate, in terms of deposition and trial testimony, approximately 50 times in the past 15, 20 years.
What type of cases did you testify as an expert in?
They're pretty varied. So some of them have been medical malpractice. I've also done a number of cases evaluating victims who've been subject to physical or sexual assault or trauma.
What work were you asked to do in this case?
My role in this case was to give my opinions about the testimony and opinions of Dr. Spiegel, whom you heard from yesterday morning.
And what work have you done to form your opinion?
I was present yesterday in court listening to his testimony. I have viewed his depositions. He had 2 depositions earlier this year, and I watched those depositions. I've also read a lot of deposition testimony. For example, testimony by Mr. Depp's psychiatrist, Dr. Blaustein, by his physician, Dr. Kipper, and nurse Debbie Lloyd. I've reviewed depositions by many of the therapists involved in this case, including Dr. Banks, the relationship consultant, Dr. Cohen, who was Ms. Heard's therapist, and I think Dr. Anderson, who I think provided some couples therapy. I've also reviewed the medical records of Dr. Kipper and Dr. Blaustein, and some various email communications. I think a lot of the information that has been talked about here.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, we'd like to offer Dr. Shaw as an expert in the field of psychiatry.
Any objection?
We approach.
Okay. So any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, so he'll be moved as an expert. Thank you.
Dr. Shaw, you testified that you observed Dr. Spiegel's testimony yesterday.
Yes, that's correct.
And to reorient the jury, can you please generally describe the main areas in which Dr. Spiegel testified?
Yes, he.
Objection, Your Honor. They heard what he testified to. What's his opinion?
All right.
Foundation to reorient them?
That's okay. We can move forward.
Okay. Do you have an opinion of Dr. Spiegel's testimony?
Yes, I do.
And what is your opinion?
I have a couple of primary opinions. The first is that my opinion is that he violated the ethical principles that are outlined in the Goldwater Rule when he gave his opinions about Mr. Depp, specifically with relationship to personality traits and his cognitive abilities. My second primary opinion would be that Dr. Spiegel's opinions were unreliable and that he had insufficient information.
Objection, Your Honor.
All right. You're going to approach?
Yeah.
Well, it appears that they're at the bench for quite some time. And I was, impressed with the Hicksville witness because he really didn't have a dog in that fight. The only thing is, him trying to share his personal experience of trauma. He could have probably left that out and just stuck with the facts of the case. And it was impactful, though. Now, as you all remember, yesterday was Dr. Spiegel, who...
Dr. Shaw, you mentioned the Goldwater rule.
here they
What
come.
led up to the publication of the Goldwater rule?
The Goldwater rule came about in response to an incident that occurred during the 1964 presidential election when Senator Barry Goldwater was running as a Republican candidate. And there was a magazine called Fact Magazine that started a campaign to discredit Senator Goldwater. And they obtained a mailing list from the AMA and sent out a single survey questionnaire to about 12,000 psychiatrists in the US, asking if they felt that Senator Goldwater was fit to run for office. And about 2,000 psychiatrists responded, 1,000 of whom expressed very negative opinions about Senator Goldwater and made comments such as, for example, he was a megalomaniac, he was a paranoid schizophrenic, that he had narcissistic personality disorder. And as a result of that, he was replaced as a candidate and then went on to sue Fact Magazine for defamation of character. And he was successful in that lawsuit. And in response to this incident, the American Psychiatric Association, that I think was really concerned about how psychiatry was being represented and statements psychiatrists were making about someone they had never met or evaluated, issued the Goldwater rule. And the main premise of the Goldwater rule was that it was improper for a psychiatrist to render a professional opinion about a public figure unless they had personally and closely evaluated them.
What justifications did the APA provide, other than the ones you mentioned, for enacting the Goldwater rule?
They wanted to make sure that psychiatric illness wasn't being stigmatized. They wanted to ensure that individuals weren't defamed by statements made by a psychiatrist that weren't backed up by medical evidence. And they also wanted to preserve the integrity of the psychiatric profession, since I think the public in general, when a psychiatrist speaks out publicly and expresses an opinion, a psychiatric opinion, people generally like to take that seriously, and the APA wanted to make sure that those opinions were credible and could be relied upon.
Have there been any updates to the Goldwater rule?
Yes, since 1973, which is when the Goldwater rule first came out, there have been a number of revisions and publications by the APA. They're called annotations in psychiatry, in which the Goldwater rule has been better defined and expanded to some degree. So, for example, in 2017, in this publication, the APA reasserted that it was not ethical to provide a psychiatric or professional opinion about someone who had not been evaluated personally by that psychiatrist, that it was unethical to provide an evaluation without obtaining consent from that individual. They also sort of really kind of defined what a professional opinion is, and how they defined it is that an opinion that a psychiatrist expresses about someone's speech, behavior, or any characteristic about that person, if it's that opinion is made using the expertise, experience, and knowledge inherent in the practice of psychiatry, that is considered a professional opinion. So it might include making a diagnosis or not making a diagnosis. And the other, I think a couple of important things about that 2017 document were that the APA specified that if a psychiatrist is to give an opinion about someone, about the diagnosis or personality characteristics, whatever, that they have to follow an appropriate methodology. They have to do an evaluation that follows the standard practice of a psychiatrist here in the US. And if they don't do that, they are considered to be, affecting the integrity of both the psychiatrist and the psychiatric profession. And this revision of the Goldwater rule definitely received a lot of support. The president of the APA at the time stated that breaking the Goldwater rule was irresponsible, stigmatizing, and definitely unethical. So that was a statement, a very strong statement from the president of the APA.
What other medical organizations have weighed in on this issue?
Yeah, the number of organizations have their own sort of version of the Goldwater rule. The American Medical Association, that represents physicians in the US, has an annual meeting, and they have what's called a Council of Ethical and Judicial Affairs, and they had a meeting in 2017 in Honolulu, and they came up with their own statements about the issue of whether physicians can provide opinions without directly evaluating somebody. And their opinion was that physicians should refrain from giving a psychiatric diagnosis about any public figure, including celebrities and people in the media.
Are there exceptions to the Goldwater rule?
There are exceptions, yeah. And I think Dr. Spiegel had a lot to say about this yesterday when he was saying that if you couldn't express an opinion without evaluating someone, it sort of made the whole specialty of or role of experts in the court sort of null and void. But there are exceptions and situations in which an expert can give testimony in court. So one good example would be if there was a medical malpractice case, or if there was a case that involved a patient who'd committed suicide and the courts wanted to find out whether the psychiatrist had followed appropriate practice. The expert can review medical records and can give an opinion based on those records, provided those records have sufficient information, for example, about the diagnoses, about the treatment, about how the patient was responding or not responding to treatment.
Did you form an opinion about whether Dr. Spiegel complied with the Goldwater rule?
Well, my opinion is that he did not. He expressed a number of professional opinions about Mr. Depp that we heard about yesterday. And again, he did so without an evaluation, without consent. He did not follow the guidelines of the APA in the 2017 revision, where it was considered important that there be sufficient information obtained by that expert to give an opinion. So I would definitely felt that his conduct, unfortunately, did violate the Goldwater rule.
And specifically, what opinions of that Dr. Spiegel gave yesterday do you feel violated the Goldwater rule?
Yeah, I think that, well, there were sort of two primary ones. The first that you heard about was that Dr. Spiegel had professional opinions about Mr. Depp's personality. And he talked a lot about how he believed that Mr. Depp had narcissistic personality traits. So, and he also, talked a lot about narcissistic personality disorder. So, narcissistic personality disorder is a diagnosis in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It's called the DSM-5 for short. It's a diagnostic manual published by the APA.
Objection, Your Honor. Can we break for a moment?
Okay.
Go ahead, Dr. Shaw, please continue.
Sure. So I was just talking about narcissistic personality disorder in the DSM-5. So the diagnostic criteria for that are, I'm not going to remember every word about this, but essentially it's a pattern of grandiosity, a need for admiration, a lack of empathy that's demonstrated by that person since young adulthood. And the DSM-5 has 9 specific criteria, and for someone to meet the diagnosis, you have to meet 5 of those criteria. And so when, as a psychiatrist, we're trying to make a diagnosis of any personality disorder or any diagnosis in general, the normal professional guidelines would dictate that we would do a very careful diagnostic interview. And there are actually interviews specifically written to assess personality disorders. It's also possible to have the individual fill out questionnaires. There's something called the Narcissistic Personality Inventory. This is a 40-item checklist that taps into various components of narcissistic personality disorder. And it's also possible to get psychological testing, like the MMPI that I think you heard about in reference to one of the other experts here. So with all of this information, including collateral information from family members, work colleagues, information of that sort, it is possible to come up with a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. So in the case of Dr. Spiegel, he had none of this information, even though he came out and stated with what he described as a degree of medical certainty that Mr. Depp had narcissistic personality traits. And if you remember somewhat towards the end of his testimony yesterday, he was asked to, since he couldn't provide any documentation from the medical record about narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic personality traits, he was asked about what is referred to a lot in his testimony as record evidence. So information that he obtained from depositions, from text messages, from emails, whatever. And so he was asked to give, I think, 5 examples of record evidence that would make it seem like Mr. Depp met criteria for narcissistic personality traits. And I'll just mention a couple of them, just to illustrate my opinion, is that testimony did not really hold together. So he stated, for example, that one of the criteria for narcissism is narcissistic personality disorder is a sense of entitlement. And the example Dr. Spiegel gave is that he believed that Ms. Heard married him for his money. So clearly, sense of entitlement is from a psychiatry perspective, that's very different from a belief that someone wanted you for your money. A second example that was given was that he was asked to give an example of how Mr. Depp had shown that he was envious of others, which is another criterion for narcissistic personality disorder. And the example that Dr. Spiegel gave is that Mr. Depp was jealous of Ms. Heard because he believed she was having an affair with Mr. Franco. Now, if we look at these two terms as a psychiatrist, there's a big difference between being envious and being jealous. As a psychiatrist, when I think about envy, I think about somebody wants something that someone else has, and it makes them feel bad.
I think this is going beyond his
All right.
investigation.
He's giving his opinion as to how Dr. Spiegel violated the Goldwater rule with respect to his testimony about narcissistic personality traits.
He did, but now sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. Okay, and you mentioned two major examples. What was the second one?
The second one was confusing being envious with being jealous.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Shaw. I mean, you mentioned two major examples of ways Dr. Spiegel violated the Goldwater rule. What is the second?
Oh, sure. So the other big category had to do with Dr. Spiegel's evaluation of Mr. Depp's cognitive abilities. And his general opinion was that Mr. Depp had deficits in his memory, in his attention, in his processing speed, that he had word-finding difficulties. Again, Dr. Spiegel did not evaluate Mr. Depp, and the information that he relied upon, there were two pieces of information. The first was that he watched a very long deposition that Mr. Depp gave the day after I think he had flown back from London to the East Coast. And he made observations about Mr. Depp's behavior in that deposition, and felt that he could opine or give an opinion about processing speed and other cognitive aspects. He also made reference to something you heard about yesterday, this thing called the mini mental status examination. This is a brief screen for memory and cognitive functioning that is often done. And he testified that Dr. Blaustein had administered the mini mental status examination. And although, from the records, all we know is that...
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustain the objection.
Dr. Shaw, without going into Dr. Blaustein's record, what information does a mini mental exam provide?
Objection, Your Honor. It's beyond the scope of his designation.
Overruled as to that limited question.
Yeah, so the mini mental status is, it's a series of about 10 or 11 questions and tasks that someone completes, and you get a score out of 30. What Dr. Spiegel testified was that Mr. Depp could not recall 3 words after 5 minutes. And he used that as an example of Mr. Depp having cognitive deficits that he specifically attributed to Mr. Depp's alcohol and substance abuse. And he really did not have sufficient information. I liken a mini mental status exam as it's like taking someone's temperature. If it's elevated...
Objection, Your Honor, and I think it's going beyond designation.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Now it's probably a good time for a break.
Okay, sure. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know you had a break, but we didn't. So we're going to go ahead and take our afternoon break for 15 minutes. Do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research, okay? You can stay right there, Doctor. All right, you're excused for the 15 minutes too, sir, Doctor. Okay, we'll come back at 4:17 then, finish the day? Okay.
Okay, everyone, we are at break, and it has been an interesting evening. What we're going to do is recap a couple of things, and those are going to be the testimony since we came back. Doug Bania, and we know that he did a lot of analysis on the social media, and he's a rebuttal witness and broke it down as far as Amber Heard's popularity on social media. Um, the tweets, he went more in depth in the tweets that was happening on social media. One thing that as a social media person, and I'm sure you all are too, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, is that everything doesn't happen on Twitter. I feel that Amber Heard's team has relied so much on the tweets, and I was glad when Mr. Bania came to testify because he gave a larger scope other than Twitter. He also gave a scope regarding Instagram, Facebook, and social media as a whole. So that was very good. Then we had the testimony, which was unexpected. It was expected because it was on the list, but it was unexpected that he would testify because there was a question on Morgan Knight's testimony because he had seen previous information regarding the trial. As a matter of fact, how Johnny Depp's team found him was that he replied to a social media post regarding Hicksville. And when he, excuse me, replied to that post, an old employee of his reached out to him and said, do you mind if we forward your information to Johnny Depp's team? He would love to, I'm sure that they want to hear you and speak with you. And he gave that information. And then the judge questioned the witness as to what he saw, what he heard, what he did, regarding the trial prior to being in contact with Johnny Depp's team. He stated that he had replied to a tweet and briefly watched a clip of the Hicksville. And so he also testified to the judge that he had indeed, responded on social media. Then both attorneys, Amber Heard's attorney, well, not Depp's attorney, Amber Heard's attorney questioned him, and she really wanted to go into depth as far as the details of all the conversations that he had with Johnny Depp's team. Some of it got in, some of it didn't, as far as that's concerned, because they were evoking privilege. The judge allowed him to testify, and it was really totally, absolutely opposite of what Amber Heard and her friends said that transpired that night. Also remember that there was a witness that testified that it did not happen as Amber Heard stated that it happened during that time. What was disturbing to me was when, I guess I have to retract that. Elaine, who is Amber Heard's attorney, she's just doing her job. She has to try to discredit this witness to make it seem like he has an ulterior motive, so it won't be such a hard impact on their client. So she questioned whether or not he was just a fan guy and he wanted to be on TV. He saw it was on TV, and so he was eager to testify and everything of that nature. He did, during his testimony, state that he was a victim of domestic violence and that it was what happened that night was triggering to him. And I think that part, which they objected to, was rightfully objected to, because that was something that really did not need to come in. It just, only thing he needed really to testify to was what transpired with the night of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Now, he did say something that when I'm thinking back in testimony, that is contrary to testimony when he said that Johnny Depp and Amber Heard was riding together. I don't know whether they went out for a drive later, they arrived together, but he said that they had got lost and he had to go get them. So I don't know whether they went on a ride, after they arrived or what the situation was, but that seems to be a little contrary to what was testified as far as how Amber Heard arrived and then Johnny Depp arrived later. But he did describe an older vehicle and stuff. So we'll see how that pan out. I'm sure that, Amber Heard's attorney should address that in closing statement. But depending on, they only have 2 hours to close their case as far as closing arguments. So it might be that they just gloss over that. But, if they have an opportunity, enough time, they should address that in closing statements, closing arguments. So now we are moved on to Dr. Richard John Shaw, who is a psychiatrist, and he is rebutting the testimony of Dr. Spiegel from yesterday. Now, as all of you remember, Dr. Spiegel from yesterday, he really was in his feelings. He was in his emotions as far as how he testified and the way he armchair, and I'm going to call it an armchair diagnosis, even though he is a professional. And the reason why I am calling that on his diagnosis on those instances is because, like Dr. Shaw said, there was no test performed on Johnny Depp to come to those conclusions. So this is my opinion. You're entitled to yours, and it is what it is. Just the few minutes that he's been on the stand, it is a totally different atmosphere. Now, when Dr. Spiegel first got on the stand yesterday, I was, intrigued, because it appears that he was really bringing the information and, like a credible doctor. And he's still credible even after, what happened yesterday. But after time went on yesterday, he really, I'm going to tell you what I think happened. When the judge asked, are there any objections to him being certified as an expert? And Johnny Depp's attorney got up and started questioning a couple of things with him. I think he got offended. And I believe that it carried over into his cross-examination with Johnny Depp's attorney, because the memes out there, they're out there, and they're out there. As far as social media is concerned, they're, making jokes and everything. Well, because he made those faces, oh, and ooh, and, when he talked about Johnny Depp's Pirates of the Caribbean being a part of his diagnosis of Johnny Depp, and him eating candy and doodling at the table is a sign. Everybody in that courtroom is eating candy at the table and doodling. You're sitting there 8 hours a day, sometimes more, listening to testimony, and you have to do something. So if for him to use that as a stigma for that, then everybody at both sides of the aisle, Amber Heard side and Johnny Depp side, suffer from the same thing, because I've seen everybody in that courtroom at those two tables eat candy and doodle or write or whatever. So, but anyway, Dr. Shaw seems to be, he's given a very good first impression as he comes up, the same way Dr. Spiegel did. So let's see if he's able to maintain his statue as he has started out. Again, time, I hope at the end of the day that the judge will give a record of time, because I'm not sure, the part where the judge and Amber Heard's attorney questioned Morgan Knight, I don't think that counted against Amber Heard's team. This was prior to the jury coming in. I don't know. I can't say 100%, but I could see it not counting against their team as far as time is concerned, because it was to see if this witness was able to be allowed to testify. And, you know, both the judge questioned the witness and Amber Heard's Elaine questioned the witness. And that was out of the presence of the jury. And it was good that they were able to have that question. And again, like I said, Elaine, I have to give it to her. She's protecting her client. And so she really threw dirt on Mr. Knight as far as saying, you are just a fanboy. Really what she's saying is, you a fanboy. You wanted to be on TV and you wanted to be in this trial. You want people to hear your voice. You wanted to know who they are. And so who you are. So that part was, you know, I understand why Elaine went for the jugular on that. But also, she definitely went in on that and she asked pertinent questions. But at the end of the day, his testimony was, I don't remember anything remotely similar to what Amber Heard, you know, he testified to what he saw. What we heard from Amber Heard, because he hasn't listened to any testimony regarding this, so I'm not going to say what he testified to that, because he didn't. But from what we heard, it's totally different from Amber Heard's accounting of what happened. Now, he did say that he was not in the area, the general area, the entire time. So there could have been things that happened that was out of his sight range or during the time that he was not there. So that is also a possibility. The part that really stuck with me was when he said that when Amber started yelling at him, at Johnny Depp, that Johnny Depp cowered. And, you know, that really struck a chord, because, you know, a lot of time when people cower, like, you know, like they're afraid, that's very telling that there's been something else. But that doesn't mean that his testimony is, you know, I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just going by what the man said. So, and I think that it impacted him. Like he said, that he was triggered because he was a victim of domestic violence also. And so I think that he was more sensitive to something like that, whether it would have been Amber Heard or Johnny Depp. I think based on his life experience, he's more sensitive to someone that is being mistreated in the moment. And so his testimony was that mistreatment, and he noticed Johnny Depp's response to Amber when he testified that she yelled at him. So anyway, they should be back any second. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And, you know, we do have a radio station, online radio station. So, you know, hey, I'll be up here talking the whole time, been up here. So we're going to play this commercial here for our radio station. Getting bored? Want to enjoy some relaxing music? Do you need to get updated with all the latest news, but don't have enough time to watch TV for hours? Or do you need to get your praise and worship on? We have your solution to your problem. SAVEDNewsRadio.com got everything you need. Listen to SAVEDNewsRadio.com, filled with praise and worship 24/7, everywhere, in your home, laptop, or tablet, on your phone, in your car, and on Alexa. Install the Save News Radio skill on Alexa, and then just say, Alexa, launch Save News Radio. the beautiful, uplifting sounds of praise and worship music, ministries, news, and more. SAVEDNewsRadio.com, created to glorify God and edify the body of Christ. All righty then, that's our online radio station. We also have 2 TV networks on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So please check it out. Well, they're back.
Thank you. You may be seated. All right, your next question.
Thank you. Dr. Shaw, is the Goldwater rule limited to diagnoses?
It's not. It's includes all professional opinions.
Do you agree with Dr. Spiegel that the Goldwater rule doesn't apply to expert witnesses?
I don't agree, no.
How could Dr. Spiegel express an opinion without violating the Goldwater rule?
This has actually been a topic that's been written and published about. So it is possible for someone to give testimony about a matter without interviewing someone. And there's certain sort of ways that it should be framed. So for example, when Dr. Spiegel was testifying about the report that Mr. Depp was unable to recall these 3 objects, what he could have done is said that I have not personally examined Mr. Depp, so I can't speculate about his cognitive state or ability to function cognitively. However, it is possible that someone who's not able to recall 3 objects could have issues related to substance use, which was what his opinion was. However, what he should have done in expressing his opinion is then have followed up to say that in order to really establish whether these were relevant and significant cognitive deficits, Mr. Depp should have had psychological testing to establish the nature of these deficits. And he should also have added that there are other potential explanations for these findings. So, for example, it's possible that Mr. Depp...
Objection, Your Honor. He's now going past the designation.
I think he's just opining as to, or is responding to Dr. Spiegel's testimony yesterday.
No, he's opining as to what Dr. Spiegel could have said, but it's past the, whether he, about the
All right,
Goldwater.
if we can move on.
Okay. Who is qualified to give an opinion about cognitive deficits and processing speed?
It would have to be someone who could conduct the type of neuropsychological testing that I was mentioning. You can't establish the presence of cognitive deficits without
Objection,
a battery of tests.
Objection, again, this is beyond the Goldwater.
Overruled.
You can't establish cognitive deficits without appropriate neuropsychological testing. And that can only be done by a psychologist or neuropsychologist. So a psychiatrist like Dr. Spiegel would be giving an opinion outside of his area of expertise if he gave an opinion about cognitive deficits that required psychological testing to be further evaluated.
Dr. Spiegel yesterday testified about the practice of forensic psychiatry. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
What is forensic psychiatry?
Forensic psychiatry is a specialty of psychiatry that relates to matters on the intersection between psychiatry and the law. So, for example, what we're doing today is forensic psychiatry, where a psychiatrist comes into court and gives an opinion about a matter to help the court may come to an opinion.
Are there professional standards that govern the practice of forensic psychiatry?
Yes, there are.
And what organizations have issued those standards?
One of the primary organizations that has issued guidelines about the practice of forensic psychiatry is called the American Academy of Psychiatry and the Law. This is an organization that represents forensic psychiatrists. And it has published guidelines about what constitutes an ethical and sound practice of doing a forensic assessment and providing a psychiatric opinion. So this guideline, I think was published in 2015, actually contains many elements that are consistent with the Goldwater rule. So, for example, it states that for a forensic assessment to be done, there has to be informed consent, and there should be a very thorough, comprehensive evaluation that would include reviewing past records, past psychiatric history. It would include doing what's called a mental status examination, which is a careful evaluation of someone's mood, cognition, things of that nature. And the guidelines do state that it is reasonable or permitted to provide an opinion without an evaluation, but if you're going to do that, there's some things that you have to really make clear in your opinion when you express that opinion. And the first is that you have to acknowledge the limitations of your opinion and not, like Dr. Spiegel, say that his opinion was held with a degree of medical certainty. You have to explain what's missing, what data you did not have that you were not able to rely upon in coming to that opinion. You also have to talk about what additional information you would need to come to that opinion. And even though these guidelines say it's permissible to do this, the text is still, I think, not fully in support of psychiatrists doing this. So their statements are that opinions rendered without a proper database, which is what we as psychiatrists rely upon to make diagnoses and give opinions, professional opinions, is questionable and not generally recommended.
Did you form an opinion about Dr. Spiegel's testimony with respect to these practice guidelines?
Yes, I did.
And what is your opinion?
Well, my opinion is that he did not follow those guidelines. So, for example, he did not have consent. He did not do even a basic evaluation of Mr. Depp. When he gave his opinions, as I just mentioned, he said they were opinions that he had to a degree of medical certainty, and he did not make any statements about what other additional information he would have wanted to make that opinion. So, for example, when asked about should neuropsychological testing be performed, he said most patients don't have access to that, which is actually not at all true. I mean, every medical school has neuropsychologists that can do testing. So I think that was an unfortunate statement. So I think those are the primary ways in which the Goldwater rule was violated, and the practice guidelines were not adhered to.
Dr. Shaw, yesterday Dr. Spiegel was talking about correlation and causation. What is the difference between correlation and causation?
Objections, it's not in his designation.
It is. We can approach and I can show you.
All right.
Go ahead, Dr. Shaw.
Yes, so the difference between a correlation and causation, correlation is a statistical analysis of a relationship between two different factors. So in Dr. Spiegel's testimony, he talked about, there being a correlation between opinions he had about Mr. Depp, his narcissistic personality traits, his substance abuse, things of that nature. So a correlation doesn't say anything about whether or not these factors caused that, the behavior he was discussing. Perhaps one of the easiest ways I could describe this difference between correlation and causation is if we look at the issue of measles, if you'll bear with me. So there's a correlation between being young and catching measles. Now we know that measles is not caused by being young. Measles is caused by a virus. But young children have not been exposed to the virus. They don't have the immunity, so they have a higher rate of measles. So the difference statistically is, the difference is between causation and correlation is illustrated by that example. So another way I might put this is if we had 100 people in a room, just bringing it back to the issue of IPV that Dr. Spiegel was testifying about. Let's say we had 70 people who had all the risk factors for IPV and 30 people who had no risk factors for IPV. So what can we say about those 70 people? We can't say that any single one of those people has perpetrated IPV, even though they may have all the risk factors. And if we look at the 30 people who have no risk factors, we also can't say whether or not they have perpetrated IPV. So the actual presence of risk factors for IPV that Dr. Spiegel was talking about, they say absolutely nothing about what happened in this case.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. Nothing further.
All right, cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Dr. Shaw.
Good afternoon.
You're not offering any opinion as to Mr. Depp's psychology, correct?
That's correct.
And you testified a lot about the Goldwater rule. You know of no case where an expert has been excluded from testifying based on the Goldwater rule, correct?
I don't know about the whole universe of cases. It's possible, but I don't know personally about one.
And you, before this case, you've never offered an opinion on the Goldwater rule before, correct?
That's correct.
And you've never written an article on the Goldwater rule, correct?
I have not.
And you've never given a presentation on the Goldwater rule, correct?
I have not.
And you've never been on any committees regarding the Goldwater rule, correct?
I have not.
Okay. And you agree that you've testified that there are exceptions to the Goldwater rule about having to interview the subject, right?
Yes.
And you understand that Dr. Spiegel requested to meet with Mr. Depp twice, but Mr. Depp declined, correct?
I'm aware of that.
And Dr. Spiegel stated in his designation and at trial yesterday that he did not meet with Mr. Depp, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can we put up Defendant's Exhibit 1904? Dr. Shaw, have you seen the opinions of the Ethics Committee on the Principles of Medical Ethics?
Yes.
Okay. And if you could turn to 79 of the PDF, it's actually, thank you. You see where it's highlighted here?
Yes.
And it says, psychiatrists have also argued that the Goldwater rule is not sound because psychiatrists are sometimes asked to render
Objection,
opinions.
hearsay.
He's an expert. Without conducting an examination of an individual. Examples occur in particular in certain forensic cases and consultative roles. This objection attempts to subsume the rule with its exceptions. What this objection misses, however, is that the rendering of expertise and or an opinion in these contexts is permissible because there is a court authorization for the examination or an opinion without examination. And this work is conducted within an evaluative framework, including parameters for how and where the information may be used or disseminated. You see that?
I do, yes.
And this court authorized Dr. Spiegel to testify in this case, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing further.
All right, redirect.
Dr. Shaw, Mr. Nadelhoff just asked you about the court authorization of Mr. Depp's evaluation. Are you aware that the court has twice denied Ms. Heard's request for an evaluation of Mr. Depp?
I heard that yesterday in testimony, yes.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
All right, thank you, sir. You can either have a seat or you can leave. Thank you. Your next witness. All right. Good to you.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Jennifer Howell, Los Angeles, California.
And what is your current occupation?
I run the Art of Elysium, CEO of the Art of Elysium.
Let me just go back. Now, you've indicated that Whitney lived with you from January 2015 May 2015 to April 2016. Are you absolutely certain about those dates?
I am certain, yes. She came and went at different periods, but all of her stuff moved out of my house April 2016.
And I'm sorry, did you say you were 100% certain of that? Ms. Hall, could you answer my question?
Yes, she did go back to Amber and Johnny's at different points, that she was still living with me during that time.
The question I asked, because you were talking at the same time Ms. Vasquez was giving an objection, was I believe that you said you were 100% certain of those dates. Is that correct?
Same with me.
All right.
Oh, you previously testified that you were the CEO for Art of Elysium. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And are you still currently in that position?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been the CEO for Art of Elysium?
I am the founder of the organization, so we did our first workshop in August of 1997, filed the legal paperwork in February of 98 to set up a 501c3. So I guess since the beginning of the charity.
Ms. Howell, when did you first meet Amber Heard?
At the Pineapple Express premiere is where I met she and her sister Whitney.
Do you remember approximately what year that was?
I believe it was around 2008. I'm sure that could be pulled. It was the LA premiere. I think there was probably multiple premieres, but it was the Los Angeles premiere of Pineapple Express.
Was Ms. Heard there with Mr. Depp?
No, this was long before. I was a guest of James Franco, and Amber was in the movie. And so I met she and her sister at the, to be specific, at the after party of the premiere.
Did Ms. Henriquez end up working for Art of Elysium at some point?
Yes, she did.
What year did Ms. Henriquez begin working with Art of Elysium?
I believe it was in 2014. I don't have those documents right in front of me. I believe it was leading into the year Amber was receiving the award.
And what was Miss Henriquez's position at Art of Elysium?
Art salon manager, director.
Does Miss Henriquez still work for Art of Elysium?
No.
When did that end?
Oh, 2015, I believe.
Each time you saw Mr. Depp, did you ever see him doing any illicit, illegal drugs?
Never.
Did you ever see him consuming excessive amounts of alcohol?
Objection. Never.
Did you ever see Mr. Depp appear intoxicated?
No.
Did Miss Heard ever show you photographs of depicting injuries on her face or body?
No.
Did Miss Heard ever tell you that Mr. Depp was abusive towards her?
No.
Mr. Depp paying your legal fees, Ms. Howell, for this deposition and the testimony you've provided in the UK action?
He is not.
Who is?
Myself.
Do you feel any particular sense of loyalty towards Mr. Depp?
None at all.
Do you feel any sense of loyalty towards Ms. Heard?
None at all.
Ms. Howell, do you recognize this check as the check that the Art of Elysium received on behalf of Ms. Heard for a donation, an anonymous donation of $250,000?
Yes. Yes.
I believe you testified previously that you understood that the anonymous donor was Elon Musk. Is that true?
Yes.
If I could please have Exhibit 4 brought up. And for the record, it's base stamp JH 22 through 29.
But for
Do you recognize this document, Ms. Howell? And if you need to scroll through the 8 pages, feel free.
Can you scroll down? Yeah, I recognize that.
And what is this?
That is an email, I believe, I sent to Whitney.
Scrolling up to the first page of this attachment, who is Marcel
Parasol?
Sure, Parasol.
He is one of my oldest friends in Los Angeles who has served as a board member of the Art of Elysium and is one of my biggest confidants here in LA, kind of for the course of my career.
I'm going down to the 3rd page of this exhibit. Thank you. This is an email, Ms. Howell, that you sent to Whitney Henriquez on or about Tuesday, July 28th, 2020 at 11:02 a.m.
It is.
This is a true and accurate copy of an email exchange that you sent to Ms. Henriquez?
Yes, I believe I'm the one who gave that. Yes, it is.
And then did you forward this email exchange and the attachments to Marcelo Parasal?
Yeah, I asked him to keep it for me.
Why did you send this email and letter to Ms. Henriquez?
Because I've struggled very much with what to do in a situation that I love someone who I know is doing something very wrong, and I know that they're doing it because they're trying to protect their sister, and I'm trying to protect her, and I'm just trying to get her to wake up and do the right thing, which is tell the truth. It's the only thing that can help everybody involved in this case.
Ms. Howell, do you recall submitting a witness statement in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, they basically just called to verify the witness statement that was submitted previously.
And do you recognize this document to be the witness statement and the declaration that you submitted in the UK? And if you want to scroll down to look at it.
Yes, I recognize it.
And at the first page, do you see a date on this document?
January 13th, 2021.
And is this document a true and accurate copy of the declaration that you submitted in the UK proceeding on or about January 13th, 2021?
Yes.
And are all the statements in your UK declaration accurate and true?
I mean, yes, I signed it, yes.
All right, let's pull up what I believe was Depp Exhibit 9. It's been marked as Depp Exhibit 9. Exhibit 9. So, Ms. Howell, earlier you were shown this document. Scrolling to the end of it.
Can you go? Okay.
There. Did Mr. Waldman assist you in drafting this email?
Absolutely not.
Did you speak with Mr. Waldman at all about drafting this email?
About writing an email? No. I did that on my own accord.
Did you speak with Mr. Waldman at all about contacting the ACLU?
I do not recall having a conversation with him about that.
And Ms. Howell, you testified earlier that you received a check from Fidelity Charitable in January of 2018. Is that correct?
I don't know if I said the date, but yes, I received an anonymous donation from that check that was submitted. Whatever it's on there, I just don't know the date off the top of my head.
And you testified that there was a letter sent along with that that said that it was in honor of Amber Heard?
Yes. Richard, I was guaranteed 20 minutes with him after being attacked for 3.5 hours by your side the last time. So I am going to stick by what I was told before entering this and what your side agreed to.
All right, your next witness.
Your Honor, Mr. Depp calls Candie Davidson-Goldbroon, who is the corporate designee of the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
All right, and that's by deposition, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Goldbroon, is it your understanding that you're here to testify today on behalf of the Children's Hospital?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So as of June 2018, had any payments been made by Ms. Heard to the Children's Hospital in connection with the $3.5 million pledge, aside from the original $100,000 check from Mr. White in August of 2016?
Yes, there was a payment, a gift on January 9th of 2018.
And what amount is that gift that you're referring to?
$250,000.
Okay, and was that gift made by Ms. Heard or on Ms. Heard's behalf?
By Ms. Heard.
Okay, and what are you basing that statement on?
By the check that we received from Fidelity. Fidelity Charity came to Children's Hospital office.
What is this document?
The letter to Mr. White from myself inquiring about further installments on the pledge that had not been fulfilled.
And why did you write this to Mr. White on June 14th, 2019?
I was trying to figure out if there were any other payments coming from Mr. White to fulfill the pledge, because Children's Hospital Los Angeles had not received any other correspondence from him.
And what is this document?
It is the letter to Ms. Gottlieb from myself on behalf of Children's Hospital Los Angeles, inquiring about additional gifts, pledge payment installments.
This letter appears to be directed to Miss Amber Heard, care of Jody Gottlieb. Is that correct?
Correct.
Who's Jody Gottlieb?
In the Children's Hospital Los Angeles record, Jody Gottlieb was our contact for Miss Amber Heard.
Ms. Goldbroon, why did you send this letter to Ms. Heard and Ms. Gottlieb?
I was trying to see if the pledge was going to be fulfilled or not.
In your experience, is it common practice for anonymous donors, when making donations, to in one paragraph state that they wish to remain anonymous and in the very next paragraph identify themselves?
Yes,
That is common?
it is common for donors to want to remain anonymous publicly, but allow the charity to know who they are.
Between June 2018 and the dates on which you sent the letters to Ms. Heard and Mr. White in June of 2019, were any additional funds received from Ms. Heard?
No.
Okay, so as of June 2018, a total of $250,000 had been received as far as the Children's Hospital is concerned from Ms. Heard. And that was the same amount that had been donated a year later in June of 2019. Is that accurate?
Correct.
As of the date of this deposition, March 30th, 2021, how much in total has Ms. Heard donated to the Children's Hospital?
For this particular gift? I mean, in her lifetime?
From 2016 to present.
$250,000.
Ms. Goldbroon, you recall we were speaking about this letter a few minutes ago?
Correct.
All right, and this was a letter that you sent to Ms. Heard, correct?
Correct.
Did you ever get a response to this letter?
No.
As of October of 2018, how much money had Ms. Heard directly donated to the Children's Hospital?
$250,000.
As of March 30th.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the end of that.
Sorry, I just realized. You said October 2018?
Correct.
Okay, yeah. $250,000.
Okay. As of March 30th, 2019, how much money had Ms. Heard directly donated to the Children's Hospital?
$250,000.
What is your understanding of the length of time over which Ms. Heard pledged the gift of $3.5 million to Children's Hospital?
There was no date arrangement with Ms. Heard to have this pledge paid off in a particular time.
If Ms. Heard were to pay this, the rest of the $3.5 million in 2 years or 5 years, would Children's Hospital welcome that?
CHLA welcomes every and any donation that comes its way.
Has Amber Heard's pledge of the $3.5 million to Children's Hospital expired, to your knowledge?
Not that I'm aware of, no. It has not expired.
All right, thank you. Your next witness, or?
Your Honor, I think we've concluded our witnesses for today. We will have more live witnesses tomorrow.
Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll be the end of your day for today. Again, do not do any outside research, do not discuss the case with anybody, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., okay? Thank you. All right, you want to have a seat for just a moment because we do have a few proffers going to be done. Just for the record, we talked about it earlier. I will charge the 30 minutes extra time for today to the plaintiff's team so we can stay on time.
Understood, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, and I believe, Mr. Rodenborn, you had some proffers you wanted to do for testimony.
We did,
for the
Your Honor's
record.
testimony in a few exhibits. Mr. Nadelhoff is actually.
Okay, Mr. Nadelhoff, if you want to proffer testimony for the record as to testimony that the court has sustained objections.
Here, Your Honor, it's a box here. So
Okay, that's fine. You can stay there as long as you stay close to the microphone. I appreciate it.
And Your Honor, what I will do is I'll explain what we're proffering the evidence for, and then we have copies.
Good.
Which I'll provide to you. We'll provide them to you electronically, or I don't have another copy for you right now, but we'll provide.
That's
them.
fine. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, for Laurel Anderson, on March 31st, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Dr. Laurel Anderson, a clinical psychologist who worked with Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp. Dr. Anderson testified in the therapy session. Ms. Heard reported to her that she was slapped by Mr. Depp, that he hit her in the head, had her hair pulled by Mr. Depp, kicked her in the leg, and that Mr. Depp gave Ms. Heard bruises. Ms. Heard also reported that Mr. Depp was the first to initiate any violence. Ms. Heard also reported that she hid in a bathroom to protect herself from Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard also reported to Dr. Anderson that Mr. Depp threw a phone at her on May 21st, 2016, hit her, and held her hair. Ms. Heard also reported to Dr. Anderson that she was a victim to Mr. Depp's abuse. The testimony is contained in Dr. Anderson's deposition transcript, which is Exhibit A. The court also excluded records of Dr. Anderson from Ms. Heard's and Mr. Depp's therapy sessions and a treatment summary, which are Exhibits B and C. Mr. Depp objected to Dr. Anderson's testimony as described in medical records, stating that they were hearsay and that they did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objection on the grounds that the testimony and exhibits were hearsay. For Dr. Kipper, on March 31st, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Dr. David Kipper, Mr. Depp's physician. Dr. Kipper testified Ms. Heard voiced concerns of Mr. Depp's behavior while on drugs and alcohol, that Mr. Depp tried to fight and push Ms. Heard while he was attempting detox on his island, and that she found lots of cocaine in February 2016. Dr. Kipper also testified he told Mr. Depp to, quote, bury the dragon, which referred to the bad feelings that Mr. Depp has inside him. This testimony is contained in Dr. Kipper's deposition transcript, which is Exhibit D. Dr. Kipper also testified about an email he wrote explaining Mr. Depp's detox treatment. In the email, Dr. Kipper wrote to Mr. Depp's sister that Mr. Depp had fundamental issues with anger, romanticized the drug culture, and had no patience if his needs were not met. This email is Exhibit C. Exhibit E. Mr. Depp objected to Dr. Kipper's testimony and the email stating it was hearsay, that it did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objection on the ground that the testimony and exhibits were hearsay. Deborah Lloyd. On March 31st, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Debbie Lloyd, Mr. Depp's nurse. Ms. Lloyd testified Ms. Heard voiced concerns about Mr. Depp's behavior while on drugs and alcohol, and that Mr. Depp worked himself up into a rage and was trying to fight Ms. Heard while he was attempting detox on his island. This testimony is contained in Ms. Lloyd's deposition transcript, which is Exhibit F. Also, Ms. Lloyd kept nursing notes on these issues that she testified to, which is Exhibit G. Mr. Depp objected to Ms. Lloyd's testimony and portions of the nursing notes stating it was hearsay that did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objection on the ground that the testimony and portions of the nursing notes were hearsay. Aaron Borum-Filati. On March 31st and April 1st, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Ms. Filati, Ms. Heard's, and Mr. Depp's nurse. Ms. Filati testified that Ms. Heard reported to her on December 16th, 2015, that Mr. Depp headbutted Ms. Heard in the forehead. This also was contained in Ms. Filati's nursing notes, which is Exhibit H. Ms. Filati further testified that Ms. Heard reported being freaked out after the December 2015 incident and testified to text messages between herself and Ms. Heard where Ms. Heard reported the incident of abuse. These text messages are Exhibits I, J, K, L, and M. Ms. Filati also testified that on May 21st, 2016, Ms. Heard reported that Mr. Depp became completely delusional and crazed and hit Ms. Heard in the face while she was on the phone with I.O. Tillett Wright. Ms. Filati testified to text messages reporting this as well, which are contained in Exhibit N. The testimony is contained in Ms. Filati's deposition transcript, which is Exhibit O. Mr. Depp objected to Ms. Filati's testimony, portions of the nursing notes, and the text messages referenced stating it was hearsay that did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objections on the grounds that the testimony and portions of the nursing notes and the text messages were hearsay. Amy Banks, Dr. Amy Banks. On April 29th, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Dr. Amy Banks, a clinical psychologist and relationship consultant who worked with Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp. Dr. Banks testified that in therapy sessions, Ms. Heard reported that Mr. Depp attacked her physically, including by hitting her with his hand. Dr. Banks also testified that Ms. Heard reported that Mr. Depp cut his finger off and burned himself with a cigarette. Dr. Banks also reported that Ms. Heard told her that Mr. Depp initiated the violence while in a session with Mr. Depp, and Mr. Depp did not object to the characterization of the violence. Finally, Dr. Banks testified that she believed Ms. Heard's accounts of the violence and that Ms. Heard was a victim of domestic abuse. This testimony is contained in Dr. Banks' deposition transcript, which is Exhibit P. Mr. Depp objected to Dr. Banks' testimony, stating it was hearsay that did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment and for providing improper expert opinion. The court sustained the objections on the grounds that the testimony about the abuse was hearsay and that Dr. Banks' testimony that Ms. Heard was a victim of domestic abuse was improper expert opinion. Connell Cowan. On April 29th, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Dr. Connell Cowan, a clinical psychologist who worked with Ms. Heard. Dr. Cowan testified that in the therapy session, Ms. Heard reported abuse by Mr. Depp, including text messages and medical notes, where Ms. Heard reported in December 2015 that, quote, Johnny did a number on me, end quote. This testimony is contained in Dr. Cowan's deposition transcript, which is Exhibit Q. It is also contained in Dr. Cowan's medical notes in Exhibit R at Dep 9122 through 23 and is contained in text messages that are Exhibits S and T. Mr. Depp objected to Dr. Cowan's testimony, stating it was hearsay that did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objections on the ground that the testimony about the abuse was hearsay. Alan Blaustein. On April 29th, 2022, the defendant attempted to designate certain portions of the deposition testimony for trial of Dr. Alan Blaustein, a clinical psychologist who worked with Mr. Depp. Dr. Blaustein testified that in the therapy sessions, Mr. Depp reported that he had cut himself as a child and burned himself with cigarettes. Dr. Blaustein also testified about the drugs that Mr. Depp was on as reported to him by Ms. Lloyd. This testimony is contained in Dr. Blaustein's deposition transcript, which is Exhibit U. This information was also contained in emails, which are Exhibits V, W, and X. Mr. Depp objected to Dr. Blaustein's testimony regarding the cutting and burning himself as speculation, and the testimony regarding the drugs Mr. Depp was taking as hearsay that did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objections on these grounds. Bonnie Jacobs. On May 4th, 2022, the defendant attempted to introduce into evidence the treatment notes of Dr. Bonnie Jacobs, a clinical psychologist who worked with Ms. Heard. The treatment notes show Ms. Heard reporting abuse by Mr. Depp, including sexual violence. The treatment notes are Exhibit Y, and based on the court's ruling, the defendant did not call Bonnie Jacobs as a witness. Mr. Depp objected to Dr. Jacobs' notes as hearsay that did not fall into any exceptions, including statements for purposes of medical treatment. The court sustained the objections on those grounds. I have some more. Give me a moment.
As long as you don't just keep turning every page in that book.
No,
I'm not staying for that.
It is not.
Okay.
The UK judgment. On April 29th, 2022, Ms. Heard moved to allow evidence and questioning regarding the UK judgment and for admission of the judgment itself, which is Exhibit Z. In support for her motion, Ms. Heard argued that Mr. Depp had opened the door to the admission of the judgment by presenting evidence of damages after the date of the judgment on November 2nd, 2020. For example, Ms. Heard observed that Mr. Depp had sought damages for losing his role in Pirates of the Caribbean 6, a movie that has not yet been made. Ms. Heard further observed that Mr. Depp testified that the op-ed had caused him and his family irreparable harm, thereby suggesting that his reputational harm had continued to the present. Ms. Heard noted that Mr. Depp's expert designation indicated Michael Spindler relied on Mr. Depp's earnings from 2019 to 2021 when reaching his opinion, which resulted in an amendment to the designation. Ultimately, the court found that Mr. Depp had not opened the door to the admission of the UK judgment and overruled the motion, which the court did again today with Mr. Bania's opinions. Finally, Adam Bercovici. On May 19th, 2022, Ms. Heard attempted to call Adam Bercovici, who is an expert in the policing and Los Angeles Police Department policing of domestic violence calls for service. Mr. Bercovici would have testified to his qualifications in the field of policing and LAPD policing of domestic violence calls for service as follows, and further outlined in Ms. Heard's fourth supplemental and rebuttal disclosures dated March 31st, 2022. Mr. Bercovici spent 30 years with the LAPD, retiring in 2012 at the rank of lieutenant. He has extensive experience as a patrol officer, field supervisor, uniformed watch commander, both as Sergeant 2nd and Lieutenant 1, along with multiple assignments as an officer in charge, Lieutenant 2nd of specialized detective units. During his tenure with the LAPD, Mr. Bercovici held numerous positions directly responding to and overseeing subordinate officers' responses to the domestic violence calls for service, including as a patrol officer, supervisor, watch commander, and assistant watch commander. And actually this, Your Honor, is the person who prepared this prepared a longer brief of what he was going to say. Is it okay to submit it rather than hearing me read it all?
Any objection to that? No objection. Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
And with that, that's
okay.
proper.
You just scared me with the size of that.
No, I
I
understand.
Okay. All right, that's fine. If you can get Jamie our copy of it, we'll make sure it becomes
course,
part
sir.
of the record as well. Okay.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
All right. Do you have any proffers, Mr. Chu, that you need to at this point?
Not at this time, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Then I think there's just a couple of things I need from you. Like tomorrow, let me, by the end of the day tomorrow, if I could get clean jury instructions without the cites on them for the ones that have been admitted, and also the verdict forms as well. if that's worked out, okay?
Your Honor, we sent revised jury instructions to them yesterday morning and a revised verdict form today, so just waiting to hear
Okay,
back. But
sure.
We'll coordinate.
All right, thank you. And you're working with Jamie about some exhibits. There's some that were, both sides noted that were in evidence that are not, so I want to make sure everybody gets everything cleared up. You're caught up? Okay, good. All right, just keep that going so we can get that, make sure that's taken care of. As far as time left, Sammy, today, I can give you a rough estimate for two reasons. One, you had some depositions, so make sure you give the breakdowns to Sammy about those. And two, Sammy wasn't here today. He had a mandatory CLE that he had to do, so I just did a rough estimate, and I want to qualify that as a rough estimate. But it looks like the plaintiff has used about 5 hours today, and the defendant used about 1 hour and 15 minutes, is what I have, okay? Again, that's a rough estimate, so don't expect them to be the same, but Sammy's going to get to it this evening and send you an email this evening with the actual accurate times, okay? Anything else?
No, thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right.
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. We'll see you in the morning.
You too. Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so at the end of court today, the judge went over some issues with Amber Heard's team as far as evidence that they wanted to be reconsidered to be admitted as evidence. They gave that to the judge. There was quite a bit of that. And but prior to that, let's talk about briefly Jennifer Howell's deposition. I think everyone built up Jennifer Howell to be rebuttal witness to Whitney, but they did not bring that in, which I find that interesting that they did not allow that part in. Maybe there was an objection to that. What she did testify to is the $250,000 that was donated to her charity organization by Elon Musk. And that was very, very, very interesting. She also, at the end, she said something to the effect, of her deposition, she said something to the effect, the way you all have abused me, I'm going to reserve something like that. You'll be able to go back at the timestamp and watch it. And we wonder who she was talking to. I think she was talking to Amber Heard's team. Not quite sure, because Camille was examining her, but then another female voice came in on the cross. So I believe that was Amber Heard's team that crossed. And finally, Candie Davidson-Goldbroon, the representative of the Children's Hospital in LA deposition, her deposition, she testified that they have only received $50,000 from Amber Heard. And so she pledged $3.5 million. And so that's a long, long way away. There was a $250,000 anonymous donation made to the Children's Hospital in Amber Heard's name. We're not going to say who it was because the donor said they wanted to be anonymous, but we can look at the $250,000 and the $500,000 donation to ACLU, to Jennifer Howell's charity. And, we can take wild speculation, but we don't know for sure. So there's no evidence of that. So everything has been really interesting today. We have a lot to cover tomorrow morning. everybody get you a good nap. Get you some dinner first. And there'll be timestamps in the bottom. They will also, for the replay crew, hey, replay crew, and also the link to, which I put in the chat, but I also put it in the comment section at the bottom for the link to this morning's session of court. So, they're just leaving court now. And that is that. We thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in to Save News TV as we cover this Johnny Depp trial. We're almost over, everybody. We appreciate you coming in and being with us. And we are excited. So hopefully we'll see you tomorrow morning. Please like, share, and subscribe, and bring the notification bell so you know when we go live. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day. Bye.